I want to thank everyone for coming out this afternoon for the third Crime Victims Roundtable, which we have held throughout the state. But the first one was in my colleague, and I'm going to let him speak in just a second, Senator Murray's district in Suffolk County. The second one was in Erie County with our colleague, Pat Gallivan, and we're rounding it out today here in the Hudson Valley, right here in the city of Poughkeepsie. And of course, I want to thank my friend and colleague, my dear friend and colleague, Mayor Yvonne Flowers. I just want to emphasize that this is like a public hearing. We conduct public hearings throughout the state on various issues, and today the issue and the topic is crime victims and what we need to know from all of you that will be testifying today. As you can see, there are no members of the press here. The Senate team is here to memorialize this for all of us, and we will share this with you. But this way we know from you who are closer to this issue than say Dean and I are. And we spent a lot of time in the Crime Victim, Crime and Corrections Committee where Dean and I serve together. I as the ranker and Dean as my colleague. And we know that we as a community, as individuals, but also as a state legislature can do more for crime victims, and especially the individuals that are not only crime victims. And there are several crime victims here today who are going to testify at the end, so we can hear directly from them what it means to be a crime victim or a family member of a crime victim. And I know I would say everyone in this room knows what that sounds like, knows what it is to work with these individuals. And being a crime victim certainly is a very lonely place, and you really don't ever stop being a crime victim. So I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague, Senator Dean Murray, for a few opening remarks as well.
Well, thank you, Senator Rolison. Thank you all for being here. I am Senator Dean Murray. I'm from Suffolk County on Long Island. And as Rob said, we had our first Crime Victims Roundtable in Suffolk County, and then the second was in just outside of Buffalo. And now we're wrapping things up here, and it's great to see everyone here, but in a way, it's also not, if you know what I'm saying. It is a shame what crime victims in New York have to go through, to be frank. And that's why I'm so glad Senator Rolison, Mayor Flowers, helping us to put this together and host this, and to everyone, law enforcement, our DAs, everyone, our crime victims advocates. It's so important that we hear from every level because it's very easy sometimes for information to slip through the cracks. We have to know when we're dealing on state law, are we directing things properly? Are we addressing the issue that needs to be addressed? So hearing it from you, it doesn't get any better than that. So I really appreciate everyone taking the time, and I especially appreciate the victims who are here today to share their stories. Because if nothing else, we get nothing else out of this today, I hope you'll leave here knowing someone really is listening. So thank you.
Thank you, Dean. And representing County Executive Sue Serino is our Deputy County Executive and former colleague of mine in the Dutchess County Legislature, Greg Pullman.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here and to represent the county exec. Unfortunately, she's feeling under the weather today and couldn't make it. But, you know, Dutchess County and her vision of Dutchess County, we're very proactive with law enforcement and the DA. We have a great relationship with the Dutchess County Sheriff. We have a great relationship with the DA, Anthony Parisi. Of course, my colleague, Rob Rolison, and I go back years and years and years. And we share a lot of the same concerns about crime victims and their rights. And I'm so happy that to the left of me is my good friend, Mayor Flowers, who has done so much already for the city. And, you know, we're here to listen. I unfortunately have a hard out at like 2:30, and I apologize for that. I wasn't supposed to be the one sitting here, but I'll take as much as we can and do whatever we can in Dutchess County to respond. We have a great probation department, elder abuse task force that we're working with the DA and the sheriff on, along with our members of our DCFS family and the elder abuse or elder protection thing. So we're here, and we represent that crime victims are underheard sometimes. So I'm glad we're here to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. And now, again, it's always good to be back in the Common Council chambers, Mayor. Where the mayor sits is where I used to sit for 7 years. And I really, again, appreciate you personally as my mayor here in the city of Poughkeepsie, but also as someone who works very hard for the 35,000 plus people here in the city of Poughkeepsie. And I will also say, Mayor, and I know I've said this before, generally speaking, once a mayor, always a mayor. I would say whether you're the mayor of the city of Poughkeepsie or the mayor of a small village or the largest city in the state, it's a tough job. And we're glad that we're here with you and your team to be able to have these important discussions today, and also being able to use these Common Council chambers. So, Mayor, all yours.
Thank you, Senator. I do appreciate you and Senator Murray for inviting me to this roundtable discussion. It is very important for myself. I have utilized the services of Crime Victim Services throughout my journey, especially when my sister was killed in a car accident in Florida. They were very helpful to me and the family, especially when we had to go all the way through the trial. So helping us with the process, helping us afterwards, and finding out, what services were available for my niece and nephew. So they were very helpful. So it's very important that we have discussions like this, so that way we know how we can properly and efficiently serve individuals that are going through some type of trauma, or whatever they're going through. So I do appreciate the fact that you'll come together to have these discussions and have everyone that's involved that's going to be impacted in some way by this. And just from what I went through, going through Crime Victim Services, when we received the ARPA funds, Senator now, but Mayor at the time, Rolison, assisted me in setting up a fund for gun violence victims that were going through trauma, and they were being basically targeted. So what happened is I worked along with Crime Victim Services through Family Services. We were able to relocate some of the families. And since then, being here as mayor, I also implemented some funds to continue to do that. That if it came to the point that we had to remove the victims because of the fact that, for their safety, that I can work along with Crime Victim Services here in the city of Poughkeepsie and provide some funds to help assist to get the families out of the city of Poughkeepsie. So I'm really thankful again to be here, part of this discussion, to hear about, how ways that this can improve. And then also looking at processes and seeing how it can assist the families even more. So thank you for including me into this discussion. Unfortunately, I do have to leave about 2:15 because I have a meeting at 2:30. But I told the senator that I really want to stay for the main portion of it. So I do thank you for that.
Thank you, Mayor. And I also want to acknowledge we've been joined by the City Administrator, Joe Donut. Joe, thank you for everything that you do. Real briefly, what the Mayor was talking about was sort of a unique way to stop the violence, so to speak, is we help these people actually move because it was a location in the city of Poughkeepsie, and I see Chief Wilson is here, he knows it very well. We had two locations, Fox Terrace and Lynn Street. Someone would fire into Fox Terrace, and then someone would, and these were two houses, and it would fire into Lynn Street. It was going on, it would stop. We did all kinds of things, all kinds of proactive policing, even had vehicles, unmarked, undercover officers trying to get these bad guys in doing it while they were there. And one night they were there, and someone was shot around the corner. But eventually we were able to move these folks to another community and essentially stopped. So that's the type of work that goes on much behind the scenes. in trying to prevent violence, but when violence does take place, we have the responsibility to respond to it and to make sure that people are taken care of. And that's really the genesis of today's discussion. Also, I'm just going to give you real quickly, on the Crime and Correction Committee, Julia Salazar from the city, she is the chair. I'm the ranker. Senator Bailey from the city, Senator Harkin from Westchester, Senator Murray from the island, Senator Rivera and Senator Sepulveda, both from the 5 boroughs, are the members of the Senate Committee on Crime Victims. So the way this is going to work today, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 panels. What we want to do is we want this to kind of be free-flowing. All of the questions will be coming from up here and not individuals in the audience, but there will be time, of course, post this hearing where we will have these discussions, because this isn't a one and done. We're going to do a hearing and then we're going to go on to something else. This doesn't stop here, and it didn't stop in Long Island, and it didn't stop near Buffalo as well. So we're going to start with the district attorneys and the chief assistant district attorney, Chris Borick from Orange County, who's representing Dave Hoovler. And each presenter will have 5 minutes to talk about why we're here and what you see as challenges, as positives, what the state legislature and the community in general can do better. And then we'll have 5 minutes for questions, and we'll learn from you and you'll hear from us, and then we'll move on to our sheriffs and Chief Wilson. So I'll let Christopher Borick, who is the Chief Assistant District Attorney of Orange County, start.
Oh, thank you.
And also, sorry, Chris, and Andrew will have a little sign that which I can't see, so I still can't see it, but that's okay.
What does the sign say?
There we go. A minute. Perfect. You got that? Okay, good. Thanks, Andrew.
And do you want us to stop when it says time?
You're the district attorney. You can
I'm
go as
sorry.
long as you want, Anthony. No problem. Thank you. Christopher?
So District Attorney Hoovler regrets he wasn't able to come here, but he asked me to come. I think helping victims is why people become prosecutors. I'm always surprised when we interview new staff and we ask them, people right out of law school, what is it you want to do? And a huge number of them gravitate towards domestic violence issues and children and special victims. And our office has certainly done everything we can to do those. There are competing interests, though, as a prosecutor. So when I speak to college students and I ask them about some of the decisions we have to make, I bring up a case that was before it was DA Hoovler, but we had a case where a person had embezzled from a nursing home. It was a very nice nursing home. It was a not-for-profit, and hundreds of thousands of dollars. The defense attorney came to us and said, the nursing home is going to go bust, and all of these residents are going to have to go to inferior homes for the rest of their lives. And they've essentially given away all of their assets. My client, however, doesn't have the money himself, but can raise the funds, but he will not raise the funds if you give him a long state prison sentence. And the question you always ask the students is, what do you do in that situation? And that's, I think, a similar situation to a lot of what we went on. I had a case about a year ago where it was a contract killer case where a person who was down on his luck, drug addict, gets hired for a ridiculously small amount of money to brutally knife somebody to death. And it was the victim's neighbor who had essentially hatched the whole plan and offered this guy marijuana and $10,000 to commit this unspeakably brutal crime. We didn't have a prima facie case against the person who planned it, except for the need for the testimony of the person who actually committed this horrible killing. So we did what we normally do in this case, which is if we have to make a decision like that, we always try to do it in conjunction with the victims, so they have input at it. And the victim, the widow in that case, agreed, and
we went to, we flipped, to use the colloquial term, the killer. He took a murder to 18 to life. He could have done up to 25 to life. But based on his testimony, we were able to try and convict the person that hired him, who ended up doing 40 to life. When it came time for the sentencing, of course, of the knife wielder, the widow, was still hoping he could get 40 to life. But that's the sad situation that we're in with these kind of things. We're very grateful, that, especially in our office, that we work with, victim support organizations. I know Fearless is here, and thanks to the Strive grant, we have people, embedded in our office. I won't go through my whole career, but I've worked at a bunch of different prosecuting offices, including the Manhattan DA when I was sworn in with DA Tendy. And in the Manhattan DA's office, they have victims. There's a witness aid support unit, which essentially does victims counseling in-house. Whereas up here, we rely on partner organizations. So one thing that I think may make sense from messaging from the DA's point of view would be to consider, I know the post 245, CPL 245 discovery reforms. There's been a lot of money given to DA's office for various purposes. I think something designated for that might be helpful. By the way, I should mention I'm speaking for myself and not for DA Hoovler. Other issues that we have recently flow from the legislation. So with the discovery reform legislation, we have to turn over lots of digital information, which, absent of protective orders, the defense attorneys give to their clients in a digital format, which sometimes the clients post online. And this can include derogatory information designed to cause harm to victims. The other big piece of legislation I see affecting things is the raise the age legislation. So raise the age takes offenders that would otherwise be in the county court, in the adult justice system, and for the most parts, with the exception of very, very serious crimes, sends them to family court. And the problem with that, I think from a victim's point of view, is the statutory thing in family court is the best interest of the child, in that case, the offender. And a consideration of victims isn't even authorized under the law. And my man's giving me the hook, so I'll stop.
Is that the hook? That was the hook. Thank you. And now we'll turn it over to the Putnam County District Attorney, Robert Tendy.
I want to thank you very much, everybody, for putting this together, and thank you for being here. I can only speak to what I go through in my office. I was a defense attorney for 21 years. I was an assistant district attorney for 4 years, and now I'm the district attorney. Some of this may seem repetitive, but I think it's very, very important to keep pushing what I consider to be the fight. The best way to support crime victims is to have criminal laws that help prevent citizens from becoming crime victims. The best way to address correction issues is to have a corrections policy that stresses personal responsibility, imposes common sense sanctions on those who do not accept personal responsibility, and offers realistic incentives and rewards for those who do. Since 2020, we don't have either of these in New York State. And that's because of the major drivers of crime and the future drivers of crime. And they are, in my opinion, the current bail reform laws, and I put reform in quotes, the discovery reform laws, and I put those in quotes, inexplicable massive illegal immigration from 2020 to 2024, relaxation of drug laws and drug law arrests, the raise the age laws, and the legalization of marijuana. Bail reform laws made it much easier for criminals to commit crimes. The reason being, they know they will not be held on bail for a very lengthy list of crimes. Previously, most of these crimes were bail eligible. The irony of the bail reform laws, as a former defense attorney, the irony is that the new laws permit bail to be set for the type of crime that was committed, not whether or not you are a bail risk, a flight risk. So if you're arrested on serious crimes, say assault in the first degree, you can have bail set on you even if you're not a flight risk, just because of the charge you're facing. which seems to me contradictory to our constitutional rights. Under the new bail laws, if you are not a risk to flee the jurisdiction of the court, that's irrelevant. The charge is the most relevant thing. Your personal background is totally irrelevant. I find that extremely ironic. Now, criminals may be stupid in some regards, but they aren't stupid when it comes to their incarceration potential. Since bail reform went into effect, criminals have strategically picked crimes which carry no potential of bail being set. As a result, for example, retail theft has exploded. Think about the crimes we see in our stores today. I never saw this 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 7 years ago. Criminals are walking into stores with shopping carts. They're loading them up and they're taking it out. And if they get stopped, and many stores say don't bother to stop them, if they get stopped, they get a desk appearance ticket. And they're gone. Many of them never come back until we have to pick them up on a warrant. Car theft has exploded. Drug sales have exploded. Grand larcenies, senior scams have exploded. Seniors are taken advantage of for tens of thousands of dollars more than I've ever seen. And it's all because the grand larceny laws in this state no longer require bail. So it's an incentive to go into that line of work. It's an incentive to target seniors. Illegal immigration. We're fortunately getting a handle on it now, and I hope that a year from now we'll be seeing some results. But I saw for 4 years massive illegal immigration, and many of these people, but not all, many of them, were criminals. If you take the low end of the spectrum, some people say 10 million illegal aliens came in. If you take the low end, 25% of them, wow, I'm already got 1 minute left, that's it? Son of a gun. I'm not gonna get anywhere. So illegal immigration was a big problem. Discovery reform is a crazy problem. We can't handle it. Cases are getting dismissed. In some counties, they're getting dismissed up to 30%. That means 30% of the crime victims are having their assailants or their burglars walk away because of bail reform. Raise the age. We are teaching criminals to enlist young people in their criminal activity because they know damn well nothing's going to happen to these young people. They are bringing young people into our criminal system at a very early age, all the way up to 18, because they know nothing's going to happen to them. Legalizing marijuana is a disaster. It's a complete disaster. What it does to the brain of a young person is very, very destructive. And they pass these laws without any knowledge as to the real issues that these chemicals are going to do to the minds of young people. It causes depression, it causes anxiety, and it causes crime. There are a lot of other things we can discuss today, but these are issues that we must constantly push to the legislature to say, hey guys, you've got to do something about this. This cannot continue. Thanks.
Thank you. And now our Dutchess County District Attorney, Anthony Parisi.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Senator, for putting this together. It's an important topic that really serves the community and really brings value. And it's a conversation that absolutely needs to happen. And thank you, everyone, for being here. I can tell you that I've been a prosecutor for, I'm not going to tell you how many years because it's been many, many, many years. And in being a prosecutor for many years, you know, you understand the devastation that crime has on victims of all types. And, you know, the reality is it doesn't matter what type of crime it is, from the lowest level misdemeanors up to the highest level homicides. The impact of crime and victimization is profound. You know, frankly, one of the examples that I always give relates to burglary. You know, because a lot of times, you know, when we looked at victimization, there are a lot of crimes that we didn't think about, you know, what the impact of those crimes were on the victims. And I can tell you I've handled hundreds, literally hundreds, probably thousands of burglary cases. And I'll never forget one case in particular. It was a residential burglary, a family home that was burglarized. It wasn't a home invasion. The family wasn't home when the burglary took place. But as part of that burglary, the offender stole some video games. And of course, those video games belonged to a child. And I'll never forget speaking with the parents and the parents telling me that their child no longer feels safe in their home. That the impact of those stolen video games were so profound on that child that they would cry at night, that they were fearful about going to bed. And my point in telling you this is that victimization by crime is just so profound and so far-reaching that we as the law enforcement community and the victim advocacy community need to do more. And I'll tell you this, one of the things that I know for certain, and one of the things that I've seen in recent years, is the impact of discovery reform on victim advocacy. And whether you support discovery reform or you don't support discovery reform, it really doesn't matter, because it's here and we're dealing with the impacts. There's always a cause and there's always an effect. And I can tell you one of the major effects that I've seen is there is less time by our prosecutors to spend and assist the victims in the cases. And I'm just going to throw out some numbers because we actually did an analysis in my office on the true impacts of discovery reform. And the numbers were frankly shocking. So in Dutchess County alone in 2024, we brought in 1.6 million PDF and Word documents, only PDF and Word documents, through our discovery ingestion. And what we did is we looked at that and we said, well, a PDF and a Word document, it could be 1 page, it could be 1,000 pages. We couldn't differentiate across the board. But we said, what would be a conservative time period for review of those documents? And we set it at 5 minutes. So just to review those Word documents and PDFs would have required 96 assistant DAs working all year long just doing that. Now we're an office of under 50 assistant DAs. What do you think the impact on victim advocacy and the assistance the assistant DAs can provide to those victims is when they're doing so much on discovery? It's sad. One of our new initiatives in the county exec's office, I always love to hear the word new initiative out of my mouth, is we want to invest in victim resources in the DA's office. We have 3 victim advocates that primarily work on domestic violence and sexual assault cases. And frankly, that isn't enough, even with the assistance of family services. But we have no advocates that actually work on the remainder of the cases. Our goal is to build a robust program, and the hopes is that we'll see some state money, some state financing to help us build a victim advocacy unit in the office that will assist with victimization across the board on all crimes, whether it be low-level crimes, DWI crimes, vehicular assaults, vehicular manslaughters, burglaries, domestic violence, sexual assaults, or homicides. And that's our goal. And I think that's an area that we really need to invest money into, is the staffing that can help, the programming that can help, because victimization is real. Victims are truly impacted for the rest of their lives by the crimes that are committed against them. And our goal should be to support them throughout their life, not just during the criminal case, because they've suffered a loss. They truly have. So I hope that our state senators can help us with that, but I truly believe that we need more resources to support our victims, not only throughout the process, but after the process as well. Thank you.
So Anthony, thank you for that. I'm going to jump right into that topic. Our colleague from the island, Senator Steve Rhodes, has a bill, was introduced recently on very, very similar to what you're saying as far as additional advocates. What he is proposing, and we're of course supporting, is a statewide, at the state level, state agency level, someone who actually has that title, not necessarily connected to say, and they could be connected to OVS or DCJS, but someone that's strictly their responsibility to speak to those types of topics. And with the service providers here in the audience today, there's a gap. And I would assume, obviously, you're seeing it, of course, and Bob and Chris, I would say similar into Butte County and Orange, where if you had additional resources for victims, because we know it's challenging to do a lot of the things that used to be done as far as prosecuting people, and people can feel sort of left out of that. Do you have further comments on that, Chris?
Yeah, I think that kind of thing would be helpful to be able to get the services where they need, as DA Parisi said. Very often there are services pointed towards a particular class of victims as opposed to sort of, victims on a whole. And I think also, like they were saying, like DA Kennedy was saying, sometimes a crime that you don't think of as a violent crime has a profound impact on somebody. So I think that would be helpful.
We certainly need the money. We certainly need the personnel. We have a policy in my office, and we do our best to keep to it, is that any crime that involves when I say person, all crimes involve people, but assaults, domestic violence, anything where an individual is directly impacted, burglaries, the victim must be contacted immediately, and they have to keep them in the loop. And that's oftentimes at the expense of our discovery requirements, but discovery is worthless if we're not taking care of the victim. So we do that, and we have to sometimes explain to them why we have to make a certain offer, because the time constraints are such that we just have to. And for the most part, they understand, but sometimes they don't. And it's tough. It's very tough. You have to make choices as to, I've got a staff of 9 ADAs and me. I carry my own court load. I go to local courts. But when I see a person who's a victim of a drunk driver, their car was smashed, they don't have a lot of injuries. You think, well, it's just a car crash. It's not. If it's a civil car crash, that's bad enough. We have lawsuits about those. When it's a criminal car crash, and you have to tell that person that we got to rush to do this, we're going to make this off because of this, the person's like, the hell, what kind of system is this? What do you mean you got to look at 25 hours of video? For what? He smashed my car. Some of these cases, there's a car crash, ladies and gentlemen, you can have 60 hours of video that one of my 8 ADAs or I have to look at. That's just a video. District Attorney Parisi has very clearly shown us in other meetings and here the amount of paperwork, the number of hours it takes to go through this. So it's a great point, Anthony. Our victims are being impacted by these laws in ways that I think you very, very profoundly stated.
Thank you. Less paperwork, more victim advocates. Senator Murray?
Did you want to get her?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, Anthony. Go ahead, please.
No, I think that, and one of the things that, I've noticed, at least in my time, is we don't seem to have a statewide coordinated approach to a lot of things. And one thing that I've been very fortunate, thanks to our county exec's office, is, the investment in technology. So, one of our initiatives right now is really to invest in technology that would allow for a victim portal, essentially, so that they can easily access information about their cases and allow them to keep up to date. And again, most of the offices, most of the DA's offices throughout the state use the same case management system, but for, some of the downstate counties. So it would seem to make the most sense that NIPD, which is the organization in DASNY, would really spearhead that, rather than the local DA's offices having to really spearhead that and produce these type of portals individually. So I think funding, at the state level that would allow a coordinated response, throughout New York State that would be beneficial, to all the counties would be incredible. And I know the county executive's office would be thankful if the state paid for it rather than the county paid for it.
Always funding.
Always that. Thank you. I want to stick with discovery. First, let me share something. First, DA Tierney says hello to all of you. I bring that up because even myself and you in the audience, I'm sure you've had this incident where you read a story in the paper about a person being pulled over and they have 76 suspensions. And you're like, how are they still driving? How are they still on the road? Why are they not in jail? And out of all those suspensions, there could end up being a drunk driving accident or an accident that really hurt someone. And lo and behold, now we have another crime victim. And the reason, and I've said this too, why? Why are they not convicted? Why are they not off the road? You heard it. It's the discovery laws. D.A. Tierney explained it to me. Now, I passed a bill, thanks to my colleague's help, Angelica's Law, which reduced the number of suspensions necessary before it's a felony. Believe it or not, state law was you could get caught up to 10 times and you weren't going anywhere. You were getting a little slap on the wrist. That's it, back out on the road. We've reduced that to 5. I would have loved to have that cut down more, but we reduced it to 5. So when this issue came up, I said to D.A. Tierney, why? And he said the discovery laws, now that we have these and we have that short window, you've got to go back and get the paperwork and the documentation on every single suspension to put it before. Now it's down to 5, but what if one of those was out of state or another county or somewhere else? You've got a short window to get all this information and make sure you've got all the documentation properly. And he said, honestly, we don't have the manpower. We can't do it. And that's why you hear about them doing it over and over and over again, because your hands are tied. I bring that up because when people hear that story, and now I'll bring it to the crime victims, you hear that story and you say, well, why am I even going to get involved? Why am I even going to help? Why am I going to put myself out there? Why am I going to report this crime? Why am I going to? Do you see an impact on the willingness of victims to come forward even? Now that these discovery laws have made it to the point where about 30% of the cases are being dismissed, that can't have a good impact. I can't imagine that you see that that's having a good impact. Are you seeing it actually having a negative impact to the crime victims?
Yes. I mean, in a couple of contexts. One is, as the DA mentioned, the large number of dismissal rates makes victims want to, they're hesitant to go forward. The other thing is the nature of the discovery. So because it's digital and because absent a protective order where the DA has to make a specific application to a judge, the defense bar tends to give the digital discovery to the defendants, who now have a potential, all kinds of information about the victim that they can post online. So particularly in violent cases coming out of kind of our more crime-prone neighborhoods, we have a lot of reluctance because they've seen on internet where, Joe or Jane victims, their information is being posted in such a way that they view as an invitation to do them further harm. That's one of the issues. And I don't know whether it's possible to consider legislation to enhance penalties for that kind of dissemination, but it is something that's making people more reluctant to come forward.
Absolutely. Especially in domestic violence cases or male on female assault cases. I always am reminded of a case, I think it was 2020, when arson was not on the list of bailable offenses. And this woman and her sister met a guy at a bar and he seemed like a nice guy. And then he started acting weird and she and her sister said, well, let's go home. So they leave. The guy follows them, starts cursing at them, starts threatening their lives, takes a bottle, breaks their car window, throws alcohol in it, and lights it on fire. At the time, that was a billable offense. And the woman was like, what? Are you people crazy? Are you out of your minds? And then I had to tell her, by the way, I have to turn over all of your personal information. I've got to give it to defense counsel. What do you mean? Where you live, email address, how we can contact you. Are you out of your mind, Mr. Tendy? You're going to give him my personal information? I'm not going forward with the case. I am not going forward. You're crazy. You're all crazy. We eventually assured her that nothing would happen. But this guy had a lengthy record. He had a lengthy record of beating women. He had a lengthy record of not appearing in court. He was from another county. He was visiting that day to take advantage of somebody. And I had to convince, it was so difficult to convince this victim that he wasn't going to hurt her. Because the new laws said, we've got to turn over all your information to this guy who was currently walking the streets, who knows where you live, who knows what your car looks like. These laws were written, I have to keep coming back to these laws. They were written by people who have no freaking idea what it's like to be a crime victim, or what it's like to be a prosecutor, or even what it's like to be a defense attorney. They don't know. And so they pass these laws that are ideological, and they sound wonderful, and the bases for them in a discussion room are fabulous. In the real world, they are terribly, terribly destructive. And so I'm Johnny one note on this. You got to keep pushing to get these laws changed. You have to keep pushing. Eventually, they're going to get changed. If you just give up the fight and say, give me more money, you're not helping any of the victims. You help my office, not helping them, because we're still dealing with the same stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we're seeing the same exact thing. It has a quelling effect on cooperation across the board. As I know, my colleagues, struggle with the same struggles. The disclosure of grand jury minutes, which used to be, an area that we would say it's a secret proceeding. You don't have to worry. And now, short of a protective order, the minutes are being turned over, and it really kind of flies in the fast face of what grand jury actually is and what it was designed for. So there's so many areas that really have had negative impacts on DA's offices and thereby victims and how we can serve victims, which is very difficult for us as prosecutors to see and struggle with, because there's a limited amount that we can do to correct it. And that's why we rely on you as legislators really to try and help us fix those issues. And they're real issues. These are real issues that have real impacts on real people. And we're coming from a time when there already is some distrust with the criminal justice system, and this hasn't helped it. It's made it more difficult for all of us, which is sad, because we really are truly here to serve our communities. I'm born and raised in Dutchess County. I care deeply about the communities that we serve, and about reducing crime and preventing crime, especially with our sheriff and our law enforcement colleagues. And our jobs have become that much more difficult. Listen, I'm a proponent of discovery reform, in theory.
I campaigned on it.
But the reality is, there was no plan. Just speaking of, and I like to throw out my numbers because we have them, but just from the perspective of body-worn camera footage, for Dutchess County in 2024, we brought in the equivalent in body-worn camera footage of 9 prosecutors watching body camera footage once every working day of the year. So, that gives you some idea of what we're talking about. And my colleagues will tell you, a prosecutor doesn't watch body cam footage once in the evolution of a case. It could be many, many times. So just to give you an understanding of really the true impacts. And, I don't think that, and I try and advocate on this issue as much as I can, because I'm not sure that, our friends in Albany really understand truly what this legislation means from the prosecutorial side of things, which ultimately has an impact on the victims.
So in the case of time, I know we got to go quick. So a short answer, but to that point, did anyone ask you for your opinions or anything before discovery reforms went through?
Lip service. They really didn't want to hear us at all. I'll give you a real quick, perfect example of it. Just before the law was passed, I went to Albany. I met with a couple of senators who were going to support this bill, the discovery and bail reform. And this is how the first one introduced himself to me. I went there to point out serious flaws in the law. Discovery law, for example, turning over the name and number of the 911 caller. That's just going to destroy the 911 system. But that was in the original version of the law. And this is how I was introduced. I'm sitting down, waiting for him to come. He comes walking in the room, and this is exactly what, I'm not kidding. We're not going back. The law is the law. We're going to pass it. Hi, I'm Bob Kendi. That's exactly what happened. Didn't want to hear a word I had to say.
That's unfortunate.
It's ideological.
What I thought.
Okay, thank you. And now we're going to go to our, Yvonne is good, she got the answer from Anthony. Maybe on body cam footage, was it? Yeah. So we're going to go over to our next panel, which is our law enforcement panel. I just want to let everyone know we had representatives of Troop F and Troop K coming, but because of a caseload and a serious crime, they were not able to be here. And because I have in the district in the 39th, Troop F on the other side, Montgomery, Newburgh, and Newburgh, and then Troop K for half of Dutchess County. So I'm going to introduce the panel. We'll start with, of course, Orange County Sheriff Paul Arteta. Next to him is Putnam County Sheriff Brian Hess. Then our Dutchess County Sheriff Kirk Imperati, and then right here from the city of Poughkeepsie, the Chief of Police, Rich Wilson. Sheriff Arteta.
So, good afternoon. Thank you for coming. I started out a long time ago at the Orange County Sheriff's Office in corrections. And that's way before bail reform, way before any of the changes were made. And speaking to the inmates that were in the jail, don't get me wrong, some of the inmates didn't belong in there, but a lot of them that were in there were there for their crimes, but they also wanted the resources that we provide in our jails. The county jails provide far more resources, I believe, than state prison. And to get those resources to some of these folks so that when they get back out on the street, they don't recommit a crime, was an asset for the communities. Come 2019 bail reform, it cut our jail population in half. And with the raise the age, it took the younger folks out of our jail, which killed the high school program where we can get them their GED. And I still have folks asking us today, why is the GED program failing? Because we don't have that population in our jail. We were able to force it upon the juveniles that were in the jail to get that done. So at least they had somewhat of a head start to change their life when they got out of jail. Along the lines, like the prosecutors are saying with body cams, to understand the whole body cam system, I go out to a scene and I pull over a car, my body cam is on. Any other police officer that joins that car stop, their body cams automatically turn on. So you could have anywhere from 1 to 10 to even more depending on the situation. And 10 minutes of body cam becomes 100 minutes with 10 police officers on the scene. It's a huge impact on us. There's a lot of programs and resources out there to purchase, which is a whole other avenue, which provides artificial intelligence to go through the videos, to streamline it for our folks so that we can narrow it down so that we can do our paperwork to provide to the prosecutors. But once it gets to the prosecutors, they also have to look at the entire video over and over again to make sure there's other nuances that maybe the AI system missed or we might have missed. We don't have the resources as well. A lot of the sheriffs, we're still working on the same staff we've been working on for the past 10, 15, 20 years. It's not very easy to increase the population of deputy sheriffs or correction officers for that matter. So it's very difficult without getting funds from the state. And speaking of funds from the state, we created a program working with Kellyanne from Fearless to start a Strive initiative in Orange County. And I know some of our other sheriffs have also done that, which provides a resource. I have my investigator in the back of the room here who handles that on a full-time basis. We looked at it as, since the sheriff's office serves a lot of the civil papers, we serve most of the temporary orders of protection throughout the county. So we could provide a resource in an investigator that could look into all of these papers and be an advocate for those that can't really speak, for the victims. And it's been a great program. Our resources don't stop at the Orange County boundary. We work with the other counties as well to help them with their resources to hopefully give the victims a voice, to help out with domestic violence and other crimes that occur where the victims feel like they're voiceless. We also brought in a wellness canine. The dog was trained at Puppies Behind Bars, and it's a way of not only helping our law enforcement comrades who get in very violent situations and traumatic situations, but it's also for the victims when they go to the district attorney's office or they're at the county attorney's office and they have to speak about the crimes that were committed against them. So we will offer our services with that dog to help them hopefully feel a little bit better so they can open up and actually talk about what happened to them. So
Thank you. Sheriff Hess?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank the senators for putting this together. I'm the rookie here. The sheriff says, like he reminded me when I showed up, I've only been in this position for 5 months now. So I'm still learning from these guys and trying to take everything in. I came from Westchester County, so I did 25 years in Westchester before I was lucky enough to get elected as the Putnam County Sheriff. And I see people here from the Women's Resource Center and all these different tools that us in Putnam are using. And I'm still trying to learn DSS and the Women's Resource Center and all these different tools that people have brought to us. So I appreciate that. And I think it's a great resource and things are really starting to come together for us. But on the negative side, I got to back up District Attorney Tendy and bail reform. Bail reform is something I've noticed since it was put in place that things have just kind of spiraled out of control. In Westchester and Putnam, we will have problems with these South American theft groups of organized burglars that come up to us from New York City and just target homeowners, target our high-end business owners, and just really swift, smart people who we spend weeks, GPS orders, warrants, trying to get these guys, following them around, surveillances, for them to be released instantly as soon as after we arrest them, just to retarget the same population again. So that was one of our biggest things. And we had a big case when I first showed up at the sheriff's office on the bike path, where a female who was jogging was assaulted by a homeless man who was staying on the bike path. We spent hours trying to locate this gentleman, which we did with the help of Carmel Police Department. It took about 5 hours to find him hiding in the woods and about 1 hour for him to be released, right, with an assault 3. And I just looked before I came. He still has a warrant. Now, this is 5 months ago. He's in the wind. We have a victim who was just running along the path, right, doing what we all like to do every day, to be assaulted by a homeless vagrant. And he disappears, and she's still now living with it and afraid to use the bike path. So those are the things that I worry about as being the sheriff. How do we bring this victim feel secure to use that bike path again? So I don't want to take up too much time, but I appreciate the opportunity of being here and seeing everyone, and I'm open for any questions.
Is Sheriff Imparati?
Thank you, Senator, for having us here today. It's an honor to be here. Bail reform, discovery. You give us lemons, we'll make lemonade, right? I have 12 people that are assigned to discovery each and every day in our office, an inordinate amount of time to do that. Whether there are intended or unintended consequences when it comes to bail reform and discovery, this is the hand we were dealt. So this is what we have to work with. But there's so many positive things and so many forward-thinking things that we do in Dutchess County. When it comes to crime victims and the New York State Sheriff's Association, my fellow sheriffs, working with them with the VINE program and victim incident notifications through our corrections division, and working with our district attorney's office and working with other avenues, whether it's family services in Dutchess County, to let those victims be notified of when that individual is going to be released from jail and what is going to give them a heads up. We're working with the New York State Sheriff's Institute on VINE 2 right now, which would also help with the victim from the onset of the crime all the way through to sentencing, and then after that when the individual's released. So these are always forward-thinking programs that we get involved with. We want to be better each and every day. We want to be better today than were yesterday, better tomorrow than we are today. What we've done over the years, Under Sheriff Jason Mark is with me, and he's been involved with the domestic violence program at the Sheriff's Office since 2005. We started way back in the late 90s with safe nurse training, and I think Senator Rolison was all part of that when he was a detective in the town of Poughkeepsie PD, and what we've progressed and moved on over the years when it comes to family services and the different programs that we provide. With our domestic violence unit, I have a dedicated domestic violence unit. I have a detective assigned full-time to domestic violence related incidences. I have a behavioral health specialist in on staff as well to help out with those interviews. We have trauma-informed training for our detectives, as well as an interview room that is a softer setting to help those victims and help them cope. So it's like they're in a living room and they're in that setting. So when we're doing those interviews, they feel more comfortable. And we have that domestic violence advocate there with us every step of the way. There's a lot of great things that we're doing for our victims. Our district attorney, he and I have been partners working in law enforcement since 25 years ago when he started, and so forward thinking and ahead of the game. He oversees our Dutchess County Drug Task Force, and Chief Wilson and I have members that are assigned to that county task force. We talk about the fentanyl crisis that we deal with. We talk about overdoses. We talk about mental health related issues that we're dealing with. And there's so many victims when it comes to all those social issues that we're dealing with. It's all encompassing, and there's so many different levels and so many different layers that we have to think about in law enforcement and how we do this to ensure the safety of our nearly 300,000 residents of Dutchess County. What served us well over the years is field intelligence-based policing, having a field intelligence group, which we host meetings each and every week with all our law enforcement officers in Dutchess County coming and meeting, having representation there to go over cases, see similarities, how to combat crime, working with our district attorney's office to prosecute those crimes and better protect our victims. But to beat the drum again, bail reform and discovery hinder our process. They really affect how we are able to investigate crimes, get the paperwork in on time to ensure that the victims are seeing justice, as well as the other residents of this county. Any and all help that you can give us with that is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Chief Wilson?
So Mayor Flowers and I are probably the biggest voices in the city of Poughkeepsie for the victims of crime here. But I want to set the stage of what that looks like at a police department. The city of Poughkeepsie is 4.5 square miles of 32,000 people with a demographics of roughly a third white, a third black, and a third Hispanic. Our median income is $60,000. The city of Poughkeepsie Police Department takes 122,000 phone calls in 2025. 33,000 of those phone calls require some action in one way, shape, or form. 16,000 of those phone calls require officers respond to something. How does bail reform hurt? Well, I just told you the extreme amount of pressure we're under by that call volume, by what our residents expect of us. We arrest, we release, we rearrest. We arrest, we release, and we rearrest, because as we release, offers the opportunity to be involved in criminal behavior once again. Discovery. It was discussed here a number of ways of how discovery has impacts. Discoveries, we had to, unfunded, put together a unit of officers to go out in the field to obtain video footage and other unimpeachable evidence in the field on different video platforms, on different ways to upload and gather that evidence to get it back to one central location for the district attorney's office to review that, to hand it over to the defense for them to review it. It requires hours upon hours of staff to get that done. Raise the Age is a multi-layered court system that is trying to change behavior in our youth in a non-punitive manner. However, when they're released and waiting to get through services or others to change that behavior, they're reoffending and being an issue and a problem in our community. So those crime victims that have no voice, you can see because of our call load. It's hard to give them a voice when we are just trying to keep up with the very basics that we are. We understand that the unhoused, that the mentally ill, and those addicted to drugs and alcohol are an issue. So we put together a multi-layered approach, including a social worker with us that we go out in the field. Each of the parties that we try to make referral to, it's on a completely voluntary basis. So those who are addicted or those who are having mental issues are all receiving outpatient treatment of some sort. It's of their own will, and without any intervention or consequence of their behavior, they're going to reoffend. The addicted are adding to the degradation of our quality of life, and those whose voices are not being heard are our children and elderly that are witnessing this in our community every day. We are doing our best. There is some statistical data and analysis of this behavior and how best to change that. That's both subjective and objective, but judicial intervention to try to change behavior with consequences at the end, much like our drug court of some 25 years ago that had success in that, is so sorely needed. We are trying to get to the root, as the sheriff said, at a task force level in dealing with opioids and fentanyl and heroin and other addicting drugs. But it's just as we arrest one person, someone is taking over for that. So I do speak for the victims as much as I can. And yes, as my colleague said, funding is huge. Technology funding has allowed us to do many things understaffed or at a staff level that maybe we're not comfortable with, but we have to do it better. But we need to continue to see funding for technology to make us a better, effective, and efficient police department. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. A lot to sort of unpack there. But I just want to say, as someone who knows all of you, who worked with the sheriff, with Chief Wilson, and my days in the town PD, a lot has, of course, changed. But I will say also that Dutchess County, because of all of you in this room, and Putnam County and Orange County as well, have really tried to lead on these issues before they even really became the big issues that they are today. And you talk about services in our correctional facilities. That was a place where you could go on a low-level crime and get triage. They were triage centers, and they were able to be connected with services there with the very active probation department trying to get you out of the facility while you awaited your time in the criminal justice system, you know, with parameters set based on the behavior that was causing you to get there in the first place. That doesn't exist anymore, and we know that. So I just wanted to say that because I always have that special feeling about what Dutchess County was doing and continues to lead now and with the other counties and finding ways around it. But I want to talk about Strive because many of us may not exactly know. I've been to Strive meetings, but can you explain what Strive is? Because that certainly has I think a very good impact on the victimization of individuals, especially with personal crimes. Anybody?
So we work in conjunction with our district attorney's office, and like I said, with Fearless, we dedicated personnel just to the Strive program to address.
Which stands for, and I know, you know what, why would I?
Investigator Gomez.
Yes. It files. Thank you, investigator. Thanks, Sheriff.
So it's a program to help with the victims. It gives them a voice. He's dedicated to that. That's his only job. He goes through the different cases that we get in through the county, not just through the sheriff's office. And he examines the different cases to help out different police agencies to address the criminals and while he's assisting the victims.
Which I know that was the governor's initiative of, I say, a year or so ago, which I've been to Strive meetings. Devin Zan is a former member of the department here in the city of Poughkeepsie, who was the coordinator, sitting around a table with all kinds of individuals in that field. And it's important. And I hope that funding will stay funded, and we will, of course, do our bit to make sure that it continues to happen, because there is always the victim, regardless of whether there is going to be the prosecution and the justice part of this, but the victim always remains the victim, and I'll turn it over to Senator Murray.
Well, thank you. So I have two questions. The first one is for everyone, but please don't answer now. If you could contact us after, maybe through email or something for the sake of time. And that was, we've heard the big three here: discovery, bail reform, raise the age. Obviously, those are very, very impactful. If you could say, and DA, tending to your point, you heard how willing some are to listen, and I say that facetiously. It is an uphill climb. So if you were to limit it and say, if you could just make this one change to bail reform or to discovery or something, what would that change look like? What would if you could email us and just, or Rob, email him and let us know, because as he pointed out, this is our third such roundtable, and we're gathering more information, and that's the whole point, is to get this information. But we're limited in time too. So I'll get to my second question, and that's with Vine. You brought up Vine. In listening to the other two, one of the big issues we heard from crime victims was, we don't feel like, A, we're heard, but we also feel like we're forgotten, that maybe the communication isn't there. I've heard stories where, without Vine, they might not have known anything, but even that, the information that they can get from that is limited, and maybe late at some times. Like somebody's getting paroled or out, and they're already out, and then they just find out. Is there a way to coordinate that? We've been talking about coordinating. You talked about through Strive, you have a person dedicated to that. Would it make sense, and I'm just throwing this out there, would it make sense to have someone dedicated to the follow-up with them, providing this information and more, more than maybe what's available on Vine with their cases? Do we have that now? Could it be enhanced?
We have that now. I speak for myself. I know the other sheriffs as well. With our Vine program, we have somebody assigned in our detectives division when somebody's going to be released. The great thing about Vine too is it will enable to bring that victim in from when the crime's reported and investigation's going on, keeping that individual, keeping that victim in the loop from the onset of the investigation through the prosecution, and if somebody's remanded to jail or state prison, et cetera. The issues that we have to iron out with Vine 2 is what information we can give that will not compromise the case, and that's working with our district attorney's office, that's working with public defenders as well as prosecutors and defense attorneys as well. But we are working on that to that. With Strive, just to get back to Strive, what we also do with Strive is that funding that we get is very important for us to operate, whether we spend additional money on training for forensic interview training, equipment. So with our Strive money, we're buying additional cameras. So say somebody's a victim of domestic violence and there was a strangulation, sometimes those marks don't show up immediately. So giving our investigators the tools to go out and follow up with that. But we also do home visits. So we work with family services, probation, Town of Poughkeepsie, City of Poughkeepsie PD, the Sheriff's Office in Dutchess County. We put out on overtime, and we work with those different teams to do home visits for those victims to make sure that we're protecting them, doing the lethality assessment program, all those things intertwined with Strive program as well.
With the juveniles, they get lost in the sauce because they go through their own system, and we have no access to that once they get into the system.
I think the relation in the victims and the bail reform is the direct connection, right? So the people that are witnessing these crimes and this other behavior, that their voice is not out there, that there's no consequence. If we're arresting and releasing and they're going back out and committing that behavior, and our residents have to see this over and over again, That's the connection. Their voices are not being heard. Academia might be telling you another solution may be more viable, but our residents see that it's not working. They see the real impact where they live. And I gave you the demographics of a challenged city trying to go author change to our residents. It's difficult.
To the chief's point, if you talk to local business owners, some people have this expression out there, victimless crime. There's no such thing. When a crime's committed, you always have a victim. But when you have local business owners, and we have an opioid crisis, we have a fentanyl crisis, we have a mental health crisis going on in this country, let alone our state and our county. And when you have a series of vehicle break-ins, you have a series of petty thefts from businesses or smash and grabs in businesses. And to the chief's point, he's out there, him and his team at the city of Poughkeepsie, us at the sheriff's office throughout the county, we're making these arrests. And then that same person that committed that crime is out on the street an hour later, and our people are tied up in the office getting their paperwork squared away so we don't lose the case because of discovery. So it's a snowball effect that happens. But really, you want to be impactful, you talk to the residents and have a forum with our residents and see how frustrated they are because they're victims of a crime and they're not getting the justice that they're seeking.
We will be.
Yeah.
Mayor?
Oh, I definitely. And they're right, because what happens is that some people now, what's the point of reporting? Because of the fact that nothing's going to be done, they start losing hope in the whole justice system. And then some talk about what they're going to do on their own because they feel like nothing's going to be done about the situation. So it does kind of lower the morale also in the city. And then you worry about the victims that when they are become that victim, that they're afraid to come forward or don't want to because they feel like there's no consequences there. Then you got individuals who will go out there and commit the crime, and then they come back out and taunt the people, stating like, see, which, you thought this was going to happen. That is also happening as well. So it definitely has to change so that people can definitely feel safe in their own community.
Yeah, I mean, we worry in Dutchess County, and again, we have great partnerships and doing, I sat on the Criminal Justice Council when I was in the legislature and now again as Deputy County Executive. And, programs like Restart and other programs that were showing so much benefit to the community. And now, because of bail reform and all the other things that have happened, have diminished in their capacity. I mean, we used to have a really good halfway house for victims and stuff, and unfortunately, or not for victims, but for people that were trying to transition into a full-time house. And we just don't have the ability to do that. We don't have the tools to intervene anymore, because that spot, that county jail, which I agree is the spot that changes can be made in a person's life, and therefore hopefully keep less victims out there, because that person, we've changed that attitude, we've changed that level of aggression. It's just diminished, and I don't know how we ever get it back now until bail reform goes away. And I don't mean total. I mean, we all acknowledge that there was some changes that needed to be made, but just like most things, the pendulum swings a little too far, and then it takes forever to get the pendulum back to where it really needs to be.
But capitalizing on what Sheriff Arteta said, he's absolutely right. We've had addicts tell us that, I go in for a week, I'm clean for a week, right? It starts to get me, I understand this, unfortunately I make another mistake and then I'm in for 30 days. Well, now I'm clean for 30 days. It's building blocks towards a change in their lifestyle. It's the arrest and release that they're back out. They can't fight their challenges on their own to begin with.
Can I just piggyback on that for a second, please?
Sure.
I was a defense attorney for 21 years, and I would oftentimes usually kick kids, young people arrested for drug addicts. And their parents would call me to represent them. And after a while, I started saying, if you're going to bail her out, I'm not taking the case. Leave her in jail. Because they're so badly addicted that I didn't want them going back out in the street again and getting killed, which is what would happen. So I would work out a deal with the district attorney's offices. I said, we're not going to ask for bail. She's staying in there. Because right now, she's freaking stoned out of her mind and her brain isn't wired correctly. So the parents would always agree, okay, we're not going to bail them out, take the case. I can't do that anymore as a defense attorney. No defense attorney could. It was a great tool to help people who were addicted to drugs. And the last 6 years, you know what I've been seeing? I've been seeing those girls and those boys die because of this law. Because defense attorneys that I know used to strike this deal with my office, and they can't do it anymore. And it really pisses me off. I got to be perfectly honest with you. You see them die, then you got to talk to their parents, and it hurts. It hurts them a lot more than it hurts me. So, again, this law needs to change. It's not just dangerous to the victims, it's dangerous to the defendants. We're teaching kids that crime pays. It does pay. They get released right away. It pays. And it's because of this law that it pays. It's bad. It's really bad.
Okay, I want to thank you all for coming up here in the front of the chambers to talk to us, to testify about the things that you find challenging as it relates to today, of course, crime victims and justice. And now we're going to bring up our crime victim service providers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So 5 minutes each. Andrew has got a small 1 minute, and that's the big one. And of course, you know, I'm not going to say you have to stop. So now we're going to hear from our victim support organizations, which of course, you know, when you listen to what we all heard from the district attorneys and of course our chief law enforcement officers on what they're doing and how they've had to respond to changes and modifications in state laws and policies, the victim service organizations still have to do what they did prior to that, and that is help crime victims and survivors and family members of crime victims get through a very, very difficult time, and as we've said, never really ends. And they have had to also confront the changes that were made at the state level, which has made, I believe, their job even more difficult in their dedication to the individuals that come and seek their help. Also, you know, there are many people that don't do that. There are victims and survivors that don't necessarily always get connected to these tremendous organizations that are doing all of this very important work with not enough money. And let's just say that right off the bat, because we know that's the case, and what we've seen and what we hear on the federal level with cuts to victim services funding at a variety of levels, which of course we're going to hear this afternoon, which is very important. So I'm going to turn it over to my longtime friend, who I really, along with other members of family services and teams here in Dutchess County, learned about crime victims, and that is, of course, Kellyanne Cusolaria from Fearless, which is based in the city of Newburgh. Kellyanne.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you everyone today for coming out. And I have been serving victims in some capacity for 2.5 decades. I started my career in Warren County, New York, then Dutchess County, and for the last 16.5 years, I've been in Orange County and Sullivan County, New York. I also am on the board of the New York State Coalition Against Domestic Violence, as well as the Legislative Committee and the Child Welfare Council for New York State Advisory. I think I really appreciate much of what was offered today and the opportunity to come forward and have a conversation around victims and survivors, but ultimately really want to speak to those who have been doing the work, because we have an invisible job crisis going on. And it's interesting, many of the statements that were made prior to us also speak volumes of why lots of conversations are about us without us. What I mean by that is that much of the system, both criminal and civil justice system, was never designed for victims of domestic violence, sexual violence, human trafficking, really crime victims at all. But this is the only field that any other person can attach the name advocate and do a job that we have dedicated our lives of doing. And so the invisible job crisis is that it continues to have state and local criminal and civil justice systems wanting to provide advocacy. But that advocacy is provided in a system that victims will work in or can work in. But it is not for all victims. And it is only at the expense of if the system works. But more importantly, not to any fault of anybody that was sitting here before us or anybody who will sit here after of us, the system was never designed for victims. And so it's important that all victims have connection to advocates. And really, immediately, all of the research supports, even with the STRIVE initiative, that the sooner victims are connected to community-based services, the more informed decisions that they can make about their next steps in the process. Much of what some of the criminal and civil justice agencies often look to, in my opinion, is secretarial work. But the long-term advocacy, all of the other basic human needs that victims need to build healing, resiliency, and to live a life after the violence that's been done to them is on the backs of advocates. And the sooner those advocates can be supported and those local and state funders can ensure that those advocates can make a livable wage, more importantly, that we have state agencies that understand that Office of Victim Services and VOCA and VAWA dollars are primary funding sources for victim service agencies. It is extremely important to understand that while all these new initiatives are great and they look great on paper, the core services that victims need, the rights that they have, are upheld by the advocates in this field every single day. And the more we bifurcate funding and resources without those advocates at the table, the bigger the price will be on victims and survivors. The other thing is that we have to understand that we have to eliminate competitive procurement processes so advocates can focus on providing core services, and so that we can ensure from the moment that a victim of crime becomes a victim of crime that they're immediately connected to community-based advocate, not after they've been assessed on whether or not that case is winnable, whether or not they'll fully participate in the process, or whether or not it's safe enough to participate in the process. Because the truth is no one in this room can guarantee safety. And ultimately what justice looks like at times, victims and survivors set that tone. I think it's also really important that we have to have consistency amongst jurisdictions. It is inconceivable that we live in a state that you can cross town, village, or state, county lines and get a different understanding of a law, a different understanding of service. And it is crazy to me in this day and age to think that we don't support ongoing in-service and upskilling and training. I'm very fortunate to have a great working relationship in Orange County with many of our law enforcement partners. But it is inconceivable that law enforcement is not supported on a regular basis, annual basis, on getting in-service and funding dollars across the board to ensure that they have what they need in order to provide the services, in order to be able to support victims and survivors. Because the reality of it is that in a county that has 40+ police agencies, only a few police agencies are benefiting from those STRIVE dollars. And the state, no disrespect to anybody here, is looking for something new and sexy. But the truth is if you don't have the baseline services and you ensure that victims have access to advocates, then all of these new projects mean nothing. And STRIVE is important, but if you're not funding the local providers to support and drive victims to, then they won't be there to have those services. So I just say that it's so important before people start to make up new positions or put positions within their organizations that they take care of the community-based advocates that were designed to do just that. We may not always agree, but our fundamental job is to ensure that every system honors, enforces, and adheres victim rights. And maybe at times have to remind some of those providers of what those rights are. But that is our jobs as victim advocates. And so I just say that it is important that we keep having conversations, but a lot of these conversations happen, and I appreciate this time today, about us without us in the room. And often we are the last people brought in. And that was true on the STRIVE initiative too. Thank you.
Thank you. And now from the Putnam Northern Westchester Women's Resource Center, the Executive Director, Piaget Sola Piaget.
Good afternoon.
Did I get that right?
Yes, you did. So Piaget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. It's an honor to participate in this very meaningful conversation. And as Kellyanne alluded to, we hope that these conversations result in real-world outcomes for our clients. I'm honored to speak on behalf of our team at the Putnam Northern Westchester Women's Resource Center. And the Hudson Valley is one of the safest regions in New York State, but safety is not static. Domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking are patterns of coercive control that escalate without early intervention. Victim safety and offender accountability are not competing priorities. They are mutually reinforcing pillars of public safety. What do survivors actually need? They need immediate safety and stabilization, emergency shelter, and relocation funds remain essential. Senator Rolison, you and I worked on legislation to extend shelter stays because we recognize that the time that survivors need to heal should not be limited by arbitrary timeframes, that we need to do the work necessary to support them. Survivors often face housing instability, economic dependence, childcare barriers, and immigration concerns. Flexible funding for rapid response services prevents escalation. I'm proud to say that our agency allocated close to $100,000 last year, direct services to survivors. And those funds go a long way to solve practical issues that our survivors have. Trauma-informed long-term care is also something survivors need. Survivors require more than crisis stabilization. Strangulation injuries, coercive control trauma, trafficking-related PTSD, and complex trauma require specialized clinical services. Funding streams must reflect long-term recovery needs. Survivors also need confidentiality and trust. Survivors will not report abuse if they fear exposure, retaliation, or economic harm, or if they feel that nothing will be done. We're having this conversation in a broader climate in our country about survivors and victims speaking out and accountability for wealthy and powerful individuals. And when we send the message that powerful and wealthy individuals are immune from accountability, then we do not give survivors the confidence and trust in the system. Public safety also improves when victims trust the system. High risk and lethality intervention. Intimate partner homicide is often predictable. Key lethality indicators include strangulation, firearms access, prior threats, escalated violence, and obsessive control. Formal lethality assessment protocols must be consistently implemented across all jurisdictions. Those with STRIVE funding have been doing this work. Those of us in Putnam County, there is goodwill in our county to do this work, but we're doing it without funding. And so we need to make sure that we're supporting victim service providers so that we can do this critical work. Last year, our agency supported 51 high-risk cases in Westchester County. And those are 51 high-risk cases that we did without any funding whatsoever to support that work. We need to change that. Human trafficking in Hudson Valley. Trafficking exists along transportation corridors, hotels, and online platforms, as well as farming communities. Many survivors are initially misidentified as offenders. Survivors need diversion pathways and safe harbors, and not criminalization. Corrections and accountability. Domestic violence and recidivism are really important. Short jail stays without structured batterer intervention programming do not reduce recidivism. Evidence-based intervention must be funded and monitored. Accountability must target behavior patterns, not just incidents. So what do we need from state leadership? We need to ensure that multi-year funding commitments are secure rather than on annual volatility. As Kellyanne said, we shouldn't be competing for limited resources when we are providing state mandated services. Expand high risk and lethality intervention funding. Dedicated funds should stream DVHRT expansion to make sure that we have coordinated community responses in our communities that meet the demand and need. Strengthen batterer intervention and reentry programming, mandate evidence-based programming, and ensure that oversight and outcome are tracked. Invest in prevention and youth engagement. Teen dating violence prevention is important. Digital abuse education is important. I was just in Peekskill this past weekend talking to a group of teens about Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. And male engagement and emotional regulation initiatives are also important. But most importantly, we need to make sure that our contracts are being executed in a timely manner. We are operating in a failed business model that just doesn't make sense for anyone. We are debtors to the state. We've had contracts that, in my office, we've had contracts that started last year that haven't been executed yet. And we are providing those services upfront, but our cash flow is tight. We are aging and worrying about how we're going to pay our staff. And by the way, our staff has been excluded from the Human Services COLA for many years now, unjustifiably so. And so we need the commitment from our elected officials and from our community to continue doing this work. And finally, the issue of domestic violence, human trafficking, gun violence, it's not a political issue. And so we're demanding action from our legislators from all levels of government to work with each other across the aisle and make sure that we have common sense, practical solutions to these issues. Is my time up? Thank you.
And thank you. You're right. You know, being a crime victim, there isn't a box to check what political party you're affiliated with. I'm now going to introduce Melissa Hardesty, who is the Family Service Director, Center for Victim Safety and Support. Melissa?
Hi, thank you. I appreciate you all having us here today, and I appreciate my partners in the field coming together to speak on these important matters, as well as our survivors who have come out to speak today, who will be speaking after us. There's so many topics in this field that we could talk about, so many issues that we need to work on. I am the director of the Center for Victim Safety and Support at Family Services, where I've done victim services work for 14 years. At Family Services, we are a comprehensive victim service program, so we serve survivors of all crime, including gun violence, DWIs, burglary, as well as domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, and human trafficking. As I mentioned, there are so many issues that we could talk about today. There is a serious need for judicial training. We've talked a lot about our criminal system today, but we need to also address the issues happening in our family court system. So many child survivors and survivors of domestic violence are utilizing the family court system to seek safety, and our system is failing them. There is a need for family court judicial training, as well as with our criminal judges as well. We have the lethality assessment program here implemented in Dutchess County in all jurisdictions, and our criminal court judges don't know what the lapse screen is. This is being put before them at arraignments, and they are not all familiar with what the lethality factors are, what they mean, the research behind it, or really the time and resources that we have put into developing that lethality assessment program here in Dutchess County. I would strongly encourage our county to consider evidence-based policing and prosecution to relieve the burden of victims having to report and testify throughout the criminal justice process as well. And I support Kellyanne when speaking about the need for law enforcement training. With our STRIVE dollars, our 6 STRIVE-funded agencies here in Dutchess County will be going to the Crimes Against Women's Conference in Dallas in this coming May, and I'm encouraging our partners to participate in the evidence-based policing and prosecution trainings that are going to be offered at that conference. Of course, funding for service providers. Last Sunday, we had a 12-hour shift of on-call. In that 12 hours, we got 11 high-danger referrals for domestic violence victims who were assessed at being at the highest danger. Those law enforcement officers connect those victims assessed at being at the highest danger to our on-call advocates. One advocate received 11 phone calls in a 12-hour shift, connecting them to a survivor who's been identified at being at the highest risk for homicide in their intimate partner relationship. That is just the calls received from our law enforcement partners. In addition to that, we're receiving calls from the hospital, other survivors, and community programs. When I'm fully staffed, I have 14 advocates who cover the hotlines during the day and during on-call, nights, weekends, holidays. We have 2 on-call advocates at a time. It's not enough. We need to support the funding for our service providers and create more victim advocate positions, so our victim advocates aren't stretched as thin as they are, and they're not burning out as quickly as they can in this work. I want to acknowledge the need for financial assistance for survivors. We work on developing safety plans with survivors, and oftentimes financial insecurity is a barrier to them achieving their safety plan. I want to acknowledge and thank Mayor Flowers for her work with Family Services in identifying funding specific for gun violence victims. I acknowledge the state has provided us the SAFE funding, which is really helpful for survivors of domestic violence. But a lot of the funding we see in the state is specific to survivors of domestic violence. As a comprehensive victim services agency who serves survivors of all crime, we are seeing the lack of funding for survivors across all victimizations. I see I'm almost at time, so I would also encourage timely contract execution. And I also want to briefly mention the rise in proposals across the country to create state and national registries listing domestic violence offenders. For decades, coalitions and local providers have opposed the creation of this registry, and for a number of reasons, and just want to acknowledge that we see this as an increase again in communication, conversations around creating another registry, and that alongside of NISCATIV and the National Network to End Domestic Violence, our Universal Response to Domestic Violence Committee in here at Dutchess County unanimously opposes the creation of any such registry, and would be happy to speak more about the reasons why, but I know I'm out of time.
No, thank you. That's somewhat timely, Melissa. So now we're very blessed here in Dutchess County to have call it battered women's shelter, but it is a shelter of hope, Branka, and we appreciate you being here for Grace Smith House, where many of us, including myself, have learned a lot about being a survivor, along with the family members of these survivors who have sought shelter at Grace Smith and have been able to work on getting on the road to not just their own self-recovery, but also their family's recovery. So please, thank you. Thank you for being here. And cheers.
Thank you, Senator. And thank you for having this incredibly important and I think timely roundtable. I've been with Grace Smith House for 17 years, and I'm going on my 7th year as its executive director. We do have a 25-bed domestic violence shelter in the community. We also have a 14-unit transitional housing program specifically dedicated to victims and their children. We also do provide a lot of the advocacy and accompaniment in the community, counseling, transportation. We even have a food pantry for survivors in our community. We also run the Latina program that is dedicated to serving Spanish-speaking victims in our community, which, as you can imagine, is a pretty stressed population right about now. Dutchess County has prided itself really on providing an incredible web of support for victims. And please humor me. We focus on domestic violence. That is where I'm coming from. And I have brought with me just some observations that our advocates have experienced, as well as direct feedback from the victims who are in our programs. I would echo what Kellyanne said. I don't know that the current civil and criminal systems that are in place really are designed to handle domestic violence issues. I've seen our system in Dutchess County work so amazingly well over the years when it works. And I feel like there are stressors across systems that kind of have created some of the holes that pop up more and more and more. For example, we're witnessing victims being charged with DV cases, victims in our programs, who are summoned down to law enforcement stations and are filed, and charges are filed against them. We're concerned about victims being misidentified as primary aggressor. This label is being misused, and I, for one, would encourage any work that can be done to remove that from the language. Domestic violence is not just about physical harm, it's so much more. It's patterns of abusive behavior, patterns of coercive control that you heard Piaget talk about, behaviors that are, involve emotional manipulation, intimidation, inciting fear, financial control, digital monitoring and harassment that doesn't stop at that one crime. And that's the difference. Yes, there is a crime victim who is a robbery victim, and the fallout is, sometimes years long, maybe lifelong, like that poor child, right, who had the video game stolen. Imagine a crime that is repeatedly happening to you, and you feel like nobody seems to be able to have the power to stop it. And then imagine when the systems turn on you, the very systems who you turn to for assistance. Offenders use systems to control and manipulate when they cannot get their hands on the victims that they were abusing. And we all need to just own up to this and recognize that it's a problem. It is the offender engaged in that behavior. We had a former judge reach out to a victim and said, can we just talk about it? Talk about what? The abuse that was inflicted on the victim, who needed to leave a home and go to the safety of a shelter. The ability to, file things in multiple jurisdictions is a barrier. When the Dutchess County Sheriff's Department, and we work with Melissa and her program, we work with law enforcement to address a case of domestic violence, and we have criminal charges filed, we have an order of protection put in place for the offender to then go to a small town jurisdiction where he and his family is connected to and be able to file a police report and get an order of protection issued out of that jurisdiction is a slap in the face to victims. We have an issue with getting violations of orders of protection being documented. All too often, I do think the system is stressed. I do not blame any one entity or system. But abusers don't stop, right, just because charges have been filed. And getting repeated violations on the record can be a challenge. And sometimes victims are told to go to multiple places. It takes a great deal of advocacy and work for all systems. My time is up? Really? I'd like to continue speaking, if I may, Senator.
Well, we will be able to talk afterwards. Thank you. Now I'm going to move on. And Bronca, thank you for that. We have the Senior Director of Development for the Center Prevention of Child Abuse, and that is Rachel Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Rolison and Senator Murray and others for calling attention to these important matters. I've been with the Center for the Prevention of Child Abuse. I've been involved with them since about 2015. And just to provide a little context, we have 3 prevention programs, and then we have our Child Advocacy Center called a CAC that investigates and treats the most severe forms of child abuse, including child deaths here in Dutchess County. It houses our trauma therapists, our law enforcement, our CPS workers, medical examiner, therapy dog, all under one roof to help children heal. Dutchess County, and the numbers have not gone down. Dutchess County takes about 1,000 calls on suspected child abuse every single year. We have about, it's estimated 1 in 7 households have child abuse. And we know in 90% of those cases, it's from someone that the child knows, loves, and trusts. If the child does live through it, they are 9 times more likely to be involved in criminal activity, more likely to have a mental health diagnosis, more likely to also be addicted to drugs or alcohol. We see about 500 to 600 children come through our building every single year. Last year, 58% of those cases were neglect, 14 were physical abuse, 28 sexual abuse, and we had 23 arrests. Our system does get clogged with a lot of custody battles. We're also seeing, as others have, poverty, mental health, drug addiction, all entwined in the families that we serve. And similar to what Mr. Parisi was saying, one of our greatest challenges has to do with capacity. It's definitely not a lack of compassion, but a lack of capacity and resources for our wonderful law enforcement. We can't use state contracts to pay stipends or help bring law enforcement into our building to help with cases. It's up to those chiefs of police to co-locate or appoint them to a case. All of our law enforcement investigators, so City of Poughkeepsie Police, State Police, our Sheriff's Department, their salaries are paid by their own agencies, not us. So we have to really work, which we have wonderful relationships with them. We have a case that just happened. We had a young child that disclosed abuse. The suspected perpetrator was in the home. CPS felt that a forensic interview needed to happen right away to make sure that the child was safe, but the law enforcement officer was not available right at that time. So CPS proceeded. They did the forensic interview. Later, the officer reviewed it, the recording, and had additional questions to ask the child. So he went back out and then conducted a second interview with the child. So totally defeats the purpose of a CAC. The CAC model was built where a child tells their story once, with CPS and law enforcement monitoring together in real time. And then when both are present, the officer can then at that time maybe say, oh, wait a minute, have Johnny go back and talk a little bit more about XYZ. So those clarifications are happening immediately, cases are stronger, and the children don't have to relive that trauma. In Dutchess County, for instance, we have only one investigator handling all City of Poughkeepsie cases. That's a lot. So their participation depends entirely on their internal capacity. And this is not specific to our CAC. We've been working very closely with the New York State Children's Alliance, and it's something that's felt across the state. State contracts also don't allow us to pay for mental health services for our parenting clients. We have a supportive parenting program. It's kind of the last hope before they lose full parental rights. And it's considered prevention. We also can't provide therapy to suspected perpetrators, even when mental illness plays a part. We have a case where the mom is schizophrenic, who has come into our office talking to someone who's not there. She wasn't on the right medication, and we're supervising her visits with her child in our building. You might remember the Maryland case. There was a case with a mom, schizophrenia, and she was pushing her 2-year-old child, I think he was, for over 2 days straight, and the child passed away. So these are really tough cases. We were able to help that mom. We helped that mom get on the right medication, but we can't wait for state funding to cover medical health gaps. So we rely on fundraising, individual donations, fundraisers to fill in those gaps. And lastly, I know talking like the speed of lightning, I want to thank, we're really in support of Noah's bill. I think Senator Rolison, you are co-sponsoring that bill. New York is one of only 14 states without a felony statute for child abuse unless there is severe physical injury or sexual abuse. That means starving a child, keeping a child in a dog cage, holding their head underwater, things that we've seen, can only be prosecuted as a misdemeanor because there isn't lasting physical injury showing. The same charge as buying beer for a minor. So this legislation would help level the playing field for victims. Thank you.
Thank you. And now a very, of course, important topic, and as a member of the Senate's Aging Committee, we have Christy Benamogos here. She's the Director of Adult Services, and this is also known as Adult Protective Services. And Christy, it's good to see you, and thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon, Senator, and thank you for convening this important multidisciplinary discussion. As the Senator mentioned, I'm here to talk about the role of Adult Protective Services and how APS supports some of the most vulnerable victims in our community. APS serves adults aged 18 and older who have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits their ability to protect themselves and who are at risk of abuse, neglect, exploitation, or self-neglect with no one else willing or able to intervene. In New York State, APS operates under the authority of the New York State Office of Children and Family Services and is administered locally through the Department of Social Services. And APS is not law enforcement. We are protective, supportive, and person-centered. And we work at the intersection of autonomy and safety, which is really challenging when we are working with individuals who do have individual autonomy, and yet you're trying to ensure their safety. APS intervenes in a variety of different cases involving physical abuse, emotional or psychological abuse, financial exploitation, caregiver neglect, or self-neglect. These cases often overlap and frequently involve older adults, individuals with serious mental illnesses, cognitive decline, traumatic brain injury, developmental disabilities, or chronic medical conditions. In 2025, Dutchess County APS received 904 referrals. 718 of those, or 79%, were for adults aged 60 or older. Of those referrals that were open for assessment, approximately 50% of those were due to suspected concerns of financial exploitation. I'm sure everybody here is very aware financial exploitation is on the rise, and we see that every single day in the work that we do. 33% of the cases we see are in regards to suspected neglect, and 22% for reported physical abuse. There's also some other areas of abuse that were smaller percentages, so I didn't necessarily highlight on those, but caregiver neglect, for instance. APS, we begin with providing a comprehensive assessment for those who are referred to us. We assess the individual's safety, their cognitive capacity, their living conditions, medical and mental health needs, as well as their financial vulnerability and any natural supports they may have in the community that may be able to assist them. From there, APS will develop safety and service plans, arrange for home care and medical services, link individuals to mental health treatment, coordinate housing stabilization, work with financial institutions in exploitation cases, refer matters to law enforcement or district attorneys, and when absolutely necessary, we do petition the court for guardianship of an individual to help protect the individual themselves and their property. APS often becomes the central coordinating entity in complex victim cases, particularly where multiple systems intersect. And one thing to note here is the individuals that we serve are individuals that do not have anybody else to assist them. So hypothetically speaking, we may get a referral for an individual who's been exploited, but they have a large social network of individuals, friends, family, who are able to help them navigate the systems, right? If that's the case, we don't necessarily get involved. We tend to get involved with those individuals who have nobody else who's able to assist them. While APS plays a vital role, a few major systemic issues that continue to impact the vulnerable adult victims that we work with, it really is financial exploitation. It's been increasing, and it's a hidden issue. It's one of the fastest growing forms of victimization that we're seeing. It frequently involves undue influence by caregivers or family members, which is really challenging because particularly when it's a family member, individuals don't necessarily want to press charges against that individual, or even a caregiver whom they've learned to love and who has supported them, right? Aides who have groomed individuals, right? Online and phone scams target cognitive vulnerable individuals, and as well as a lot of misuse of powers of attorney we see. These cases are complex. Victims may not recognize the exploitation or may be emotionally attached to their exploiter. Asset recovery is difficult and legal remedies can be slow. Another systemic issue impacting vulnerable adults is really around capacity and autonomy. Frequently we get calls saying, well, why can't you help this person? Why aren't you doing anything? And it really goes back to unlike children protective services, adults have the right to make decisions, even if they're bad or risky decisions, right? Many APS cases involve individuals with fluctuating capacity, untreated mental illness, and cognitive impairment. Determining when someone lacks decision-making capacity, when risk rises to imminent harm, and when court intervention is appropriate is legally and ethically very complex. And it's a decision that we don't take lightly. When we're presented with an individual who we believe has diminishing capacity, it's something that we bring to our legal team, and we really have a comprehensive discussion that involves a review of medical records, to really determine whether it's important to proceed towards guardianship for that individual. A third systemic issue impacting vulnerable clients is the lack of affordable and safe housing options. We all know that we currently have a national crisis at hand when it comes to affordable housing. It is one of the greatest barriers protecting vulnerable adults who lack that affordable and safe housing. Many APS clients are living with their abusers because they cannot afford to live, which presents an issue. They're also residing in unsafe and uninhabitable conditions, facing eviction and other financial exploitation, and frequently cycling through hospitals, shelters, and temporary placements. There are limited affordable housing units equipped to support adults with mental illness, cognitive impairment, or physical disabilities. Even when APS identifies risk and develops a safety plan, there may simply be nowhere appropriate and affordable for that individual to go. And that's frequently a problem that we have. Individuals who are in the hospital awaiting discharge, yet the hospital is unable to make a safe discharge plan because that individual cannot navigate in the community independently. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Well, thank you all for giving us a lot of information. Some that we know, we've heard, we've worked on, and then there are other parts that give us pause to always, I think we say a lot, and I know you have to do this. What do we do first? What's the first thing so we can do the second thing? A couple points that I'm just going to make, and then just quick some follow-up, of course, is that when you have systems in place that are there and can be very functioning if they're adhered to and there's coordination, and then the state comes in with another initiative, which I am, of course, supportive in theory, but if you don't have the platform that has already been established, which is pretty darn good in many counties, and I think we can say this for the counties that are represented here today, in my district of Dutchess, Putnam, and Orange, that an additional level, and of course, I mean, I support all these initiatives, but if we're not having the basics done, which is tough with multiple police agencies, say in Orange County, as an example, and then Melissa, to your point, that where there is a disconnect in judges and their ability to understand what is available to them, the tools that are there or not there, getting to the lethality instrument, which Dutchess County is one of 3 in the state of New York, 3 counties that have it, right? It's Broome, Westchester, and Dutchess. It's very disturbing to hear that if judges who have this tool available to them to make decisions based on bail and other types of conditions that defendants can have placed upon them to not make it easier for further violence and sometimes fatal violence, as we've seen, without that instrument. And if they're not using it or don't understanding it, I just want to say that's a problem. And if we're going to ask them to do other things, then those things need to be, understood first. And Branka, you said it, when it comes to multiple jurisdictions, to have to file different orders, that's why we years ago, identified that as a gap and said we really need to have sort of that one-stop location. And that was really just for services. I mean, filing legal paperwork in many places is just, that's the law. And then also too, what do we do, as a state legislature? So I say, or state legislators, but involvement in the state legislature is what do we do first? Outside of additional funding, because you're doing a great job, you need more money. But when it comes to these types of things, and you don't really have to answer that, because I kind of understand that this is going to need to be a conversation with us and just you and your teams, and being able to sort of say, okay, well, here we'll do this, and we'll prioritize this in another place, which may have more of a challenge. If it's 48 or 51 police departments, how does that get changed? So that's a statement, and I didn't want to make a lot of statements, but this, hearing from you who are doing it well, it just becomes a little more frustrating because it can be done better.
I think one of the ways we can do better, honestly, is the lethality assessment protocol that we have in Dutchess and other counties, I think works. I have been involved from the ground up, and I will say it works. Does it work 100%? Maybe not 100%, but it works. One of the things that I would love to see, not Dutchess, but statewide, is to consider maybe a strangulation protocol, documentation form, maybe that's attached to the lap. I'd love to see it attached to a DIR, it might be a pipe dream, I realize, but you can't get away from, the documentation that would be taken in real time. Because strangulation is a unique crime, and I think many of us, including victim service providers, might need more training, but it would be phenomenal if New York State would consider advancing in that direction. And if other places in the country have done it successfully, I think we can too.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. Intimate partners who strangle their victims are the most dangerous offenders. They are a danger not only to their intimate partner, but to law enforcement and also to community violence. Significant percentage of offenders who have committed mass violence in the community have a documented history of strangling their intimate partner. And in a recent study, 77% of law enforcement that were shot and killed in the line of duty were shot and killed by an offender who had a history of strangulation. I know Colorado has a strangulation assessment, and they have included it as part of their domestic incident report. And we have spoke to DCJS around implementing that in New York State. I know there's early conversations of redoing the domestic incident report, though we know this is several years out. But we've strongly encouraged DCJS to consider including a strangulation assessment as part of the domestic incident report, should the state be redoing that document.
Just on that, and then I'll turn it over to Senator Murray. Can you just walk us through quickly when you're changing a protocol through DCJS, whether it's the LAP, whether it's the DVIR, how does that happen? In other words, obviously DCJS is going to make this decision, but where does where other organizations stand within this? I mean, to me, when you talk about change, life changes, protocols change, data supports changing this, or doing, removing something and putting something in place, and best practices, in child abuse investigations and adult protective services and CPS. Ultimately, how does that happen? Does someone just say, we're going to do it? Or do you need pressure from the state legislature? We're trying to get lethality instruments statewide, and, not going anywhere in the assembly right now, but just a quick thought on that.
I don't know if Kellyanne or Bronco wants to add to that, but it's, I think we need to encourage the state agencies to utilize the experts in the field, which are the service providers. It's my understanding over a decade ago, when New York State redid the domestic incident report, local providers who were working on lethality assessment programs advocated strongly to not have a handful of the questions from the lethality form included in the domestic incident report, and yet they did not, follow what the service providers and the expert in the fields were requesting of the state. I hope that if DCJS is redoing the DIR in the future, that my colleagues at this table, as well as NISCATIV, will be consulted in the development of the changes of that DIR. Kellyanne or Breckin?
I would just, you could take Strive for a great example. I think we've spoken here between our communities that are represented that we're well-established partnerships with our criminal and civil justice agencies in Strive, but that is not a universal application across the state. And even in our jurisdiction, as the lead domestic violence provider in that partnership, we were the last to even know about the project. We received the letter last. And certainly, again, thankfully, we have well-established relationships, but I'm well aware that there's many providers across the state that do not have a voice in how those dollars are being used. And I think that it's really important to understand that the Strive initiative, the lethality assessments, are only as good as the training and the person that's able to talk to the lethality assessment. But more importantly, all of them are driving victims to services, right? They aren't really addressing the criminal justice component. They're not addressing the conviction. They're not addressing the accountability. What they're addressing is the officer being able to assess for risk and then be able to connect the victim to services. And that is crucial and important, right? But the reality of all of that is that you still need to support training, and there is big disconnects. And I have a deep affinity for law enforcement, as you know, Senator. It's a disservice to create new laws and legislation and not provide training to the law enforcement departments to train on them. You passed legislation that allowed victims to go to any police agency in New York State to file a domestic incident report. It went into effect in the 2020. I understand bail and discovery happened at the same time, but there are still police agencies within our communities that are not aware of that legislation. So you have victims going into police departments attempting to file a police report, a DIR, in a community that's safer for them, and the police department will say, because they're not aware of the legislation, you can't file here, that's not where the incident took place. And so there's lots of legislation that's happened, but there is no real transportation of that information and tangible dollars. And even with Strive and even with the DIR and the new law enforcement and training at the academy, there's this assumption that every police department in this state does in-service on DV every year. That is not true. So how can there be a disconnect at the state level to not ensure that law enforcement has the resources that they need and prioritize something like domestic violence, child abuse, and sexual assault on an annual basis when 40% of your law enforcement deaths in the line of duty are connected to domestic violence?
I gotta say, in doing these roundtables, there's obviously the portion where we hear from the victims is important, but this is the panel that always gets me upset, and it's because you can hear in the testimony how dedicated you are to these issues, and yet it's so frustrating. And Ms. Castellari, you hit it on the head. I mean, you nailed it. When you basically, and I forget the phrase you used, but you basically said you're doing it without us. If you're going to put something together to truly help, you have to understand it. And you have to have a full understanding of what you're trying to accomplish. How do you do that without having the experts in the room, the ones that are actually helping? And I may sound frustrated because I am, because too many times we see these bills pass, maybe with good intentions, or maybe with intentions to grab headlines. I'd hate to say that, but it happens. But yet, what good is it going to do? Not only what good is it going to do, but are we taking a step backwards in some cases? Perfect example, and I will say, I am a co-sponsor of the bill regarding the domestic violence what do we call it? The registry. But I don't support, I'm on it so I can have the conversation with the sponsors because it can't pass the way it is. And there are many reasons we could get into it. I spoke to my local officials, Long Islanders Against Domestic Violence, and said, are you thinking the same thing I'm thinking? Could this do more harm than good? And she said, yes. So we need to have the conversations, which is why I jumped on the bill, so I could have the conversations before anything happens. But we're not doing that enough. We're not listening. And I'd hate to say something like, use the term sexy, because that's not a great term, but in the term of headlines, it's almost like, what is the one getting the most headline? Is it human trafficking right now? Is it domestic violence? Is it this? Is it that? And then we see a flurry of programs or bills or something to address it. But again, without the information needed to make it that way. It's very, very frustrating to hear and see these things, and to the point of a bill being passed in 2020, and yet still the police departments don't know. Where's the follow-up? Where's the follow-up on our part? You know, when we write bills, it's important that we do it properly. A term like shall or may can make all the difference in the world in the law. And you know that. But in listening to all of you, I'm also frustrated because and I've heard it in the other panels as well, and heard it from the victims. And that is, it's almost like you're competing against each other, whether it's for funds or support or whatever, depending on the crime. That's crazy. A crime victim, and you heard the story about a young child because of a break-in, will be touched for life. Now consider someone who got mugged, who's now afraid to go outside and is confined at home because they'll never go outside again. Like, we don't think about the total impact. I know you do, but we don't. The lawmakers who are putting these laws together aren't thinking about the whole impact. And we need to have the discussions with you prior, not after, because it feels like we're trying to go back and clean up a lot of messes that we create. So I know I'm making a statement, but I'm just, I would say, how do you feel about that? But I think that'll take up the rest of the time. But I just wanted to say, thank you for what you're doing. We need to do a better job, and that's why we're here today. And I hope that we can continue the conversations. I hope that even once we're done here, that maybe we can reach out to you when we have something coming up or something, and get in touch with you and get your input, because it's vitally important.
I'll just say, it's not almost. The 5 of us sitting right here will be competing against each other for Office of Victim Service money, which is completely absurd. But all 5 of us sitting here in less than 2 weeks will apply for our core victim service dollars that fund our agencies, that fund advocates, that fund victim assistance. We will all compete against each other and all be scored and rated against each other in less than 1 month. And it is our core funding stream. And so it's not almost, we are.
Yeah, no, you're right.
And it is life or death. This is not a sustainable model. In 3 to 5 years, those of us sitting here may not be in existence if it keeps up. So it's not almost.
Right.
It's real and it's dire.
No, and I appreciate
that very much.
I know each year, and a victim brought this up because she lost her son, but it was not a domestic violence incident. It was another crime. But she said, so why don't we have a report like we have each year on domestic violence crimes? We have a big, thick report that we get. Why don't we have that for non-domestic violent crimes? Do you think that's needed?
I think it would be instrumental, and I appreciated the prosecution team up here mentioning, like, they have a database that should be able to draw down prosecutor case management system for victims. And I think it's important that real tangible data actually speaks volumes to what's going on. It's critical. It's being used to inform dollars. And so that's where I think, it's important, because obviously not all police agencies were included in STRIDE, and those dollars were considered based upon numbers and data.
Right.
Mayor?
Thank you.
Do you have anything? No?
I just think this was very valuable, and just to hear each of you speak about this has enlightened me even more so, because I've only dealt really with a couple of you. And for Grace Smithhouse, I'm going to tell you, you were my saving grace when I went through domestic violence, and I'm going to tell you, they helped me throughout the stages. So it is very, very important that when you're going through that kind of trauma, that you actually need someone to help you guide you through, not only understanding what you've been through, but actually that it's not your fault. So thank you for the work that you do. So thank you for this. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to get ready to go.
Mayor,
But I
thank you for
appreciate
having
it.
us.
Yes, you're welcome.
Okay, thank you.
All of your police officers and the people doing the real service, the crime victim services people. A little background on what happened. So on Thanksgiving of 2012, my mother-in-law was brutally murdered in her home. My sister-in-law and her son found her after being told she didn't show up where she was supposed to for Thanksgiving. So they went to the house, they found her. And from that point on, everything becomes such a whirlwind of, investigating and services and what's going on with the home and what's going on with the people and everything. All I remember is the day after Thanksgiving was the worst day of my life, when I had to tell my 9-year-old and 13-year-old daughters that their grandmother was gone, that somebody broke into her house and hurt her, and she was gone. And my sister-in-law and her son found her wrapped up in a blanket in her closet. And our family was destroyed by that, absolutely destroyed. They don't live in the area anymore at this. And I can go on and on about the ramifications. They did find the gentleman that did it. I use that term very loosely. In our house, he has a very colorful nickname because we don't honor him by using his name. He got 44 years to life. He killed her. He kidnapped his own girlfriend and 4 children. It was very publicized. It was very much in the papers. The court case dragged on. My sister-in-law was the point person in the case. So Crime Victim Services did reach out to her specifically. They always had an advocate there for her anytime she had to meet with the DA. They paid for the funeral. That was amazing. They didn't focus on anybody else but her. Like even her own kids, like they didn't provide any services for the rest of the family, which I always thought was kind of lacking. Excuse me. I actually was able to, get my kids. I went into like mommy mode. My kids were destroyed. My husband is just angry. Like you can't, it's still to this day. He wanted to come and I said, no, you get too angry. So, so we were living in a very volatile household, not knowing what to do or where to go. This is a club nobody wants to join. That's one of the things we say. I'm a pretty active member in a support group for family members of homicide victims. I've also done impact panels for parole to help people that are going through it to hear the victim side of the story. My husband and I have done several of those. It's hard to get the support you need when you don't know you need support. That's a big part of it. So immediately I had my kids in therapy. I, was trying to get my husband in therapy, whatever. So things seemed to settle down. Then about 3 years later, my older daughter had come up with a suicide plan. So she was 15 and she was going to kill herself because she was afraid to be in her own home. She was terrified to go to school because unfortunately Sandy Hook happened 3 weeks after that. So she was afraid to be in school. She was afraid to be at home. Then like a year to the day that my mother-in-law was murdered, they lost 2 classmates in the Arlington school system that were killed by their father in a parking lot car. And like, these were kids they knew in their own school. My kids were terrified all the time. And when you don't know what to do with that, you internalize it. And so thank God I found out my daughter had a suicide plan and I was able to intervene and started to get her some services. About 3 weeks later, we found out my younger daughter was cutting herself for similar issues. Again, we were able to intervene and get her some services. There's not much support for the parents of the kids getting the services. There was almost no support through the school system. The school system didn't want to know anything about it. Every year, I would have to go into their classrooms and talk to their teachers and tell them, look, there might be triggers certain times of the year, certain things that you're addressing in school. There might be triggers that upset my kids. My kids are terrified all the time, So I did end up, after we got the kids kind of on a better path, I reached out to the Family Partnership Center to see about getting some help for myself, because I was starting to feel like I needed some help. I wasn't processing anything. It was survival. That agency was excellent. Everything they did there. The biggest fault I have with that agency is its location on Hamilton Street in the city of Poughkeepsie. It doesn't, you're already terrified. Now you're asking me to go somewhere where it's scary to be. You know, if we could relocate some of those services, or have, you know, even just an offshoot place where people might feel safer. I'm kind of losing my train of thought, but I'm speaking from the heart, because I don't want losing her to be in vain. If I can be part of the process that helps other people in our community understand that we need to honor the victims of crimes, that we need to take care of the people around us. Our communities ostracize us. People don't know what to say, you know? I mean, I felt it firsthand. When you lose a loved one to an illness or an accident, people show up with flowers and food. When you have a loved one murdered, they don't even want to, they do this in the store. They don't know what to say. It's not their fault. Our society doesn't teach us how to handle it. Nobody teaches you how to handle being on the 6 o'clock news or the front page of the newspaper. You know, I mean, that's what threw my kids, you know, their classmates are like, why are you in the paper? Why, you know, and they're having to recount it and everything. So there's so many things in our community and in our world that are not always in the best interest of the victim, even though we want to be. You know, you heard them with the victim blaming. That's huge. It's so hard to get people over that stigma of surrounding, you know, the victim with positivity and trying to uplift them. Again, the services are strangled. You know, even my kids' own schools, nobody knew what to do in the high schools. You know, in the high school, the middle school, elementary school, the teachers didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to handle it. There's no training there. In fact, for the most part, they didn't even want the kids talking about it. I know there were a few other points I wanted to bring up. One of the other things I was, you know, I brought up the location of services. I know there's a lot of cultural differences and sensitivities with these issues. There's statute of limitations for lawsuits after the fact. You know, and then allowing family members to know information about the investigation or trial. I think that's something that should be more available as well. Because when you're in the middle of all that and people are telling you so much stuff, your memories of it can get so distorted. And then when you want to go back and revisit it, you know, people will say, well, what do you want to know? It's like, well, I don't know what I want to know. Why can't I have access to the investigation? Why can't I have access to the trial notes? You know, and that's kind of problematic. I feel like it should be a little easier. Other than that, I mean, I just want to try to honor my mother-in-law by helping educate people about victims of crime. We should be heard and not just left in the corner. So thank you for everything you're doing, and thank you for helping to give us a voice.
Thank you for what you're doing. Risa?
Thank you for allowing us to be here. So my name's Teresa Lee. I'm a victim of domestic abuse. I'm also a survivor of domestic abuse. Thanks to the services from the Family Partnership, Ms. Hardesty, my domestic abuse advocate, Hannah, Hyde Park Police, the Sheriff's Department, Detective Slattery. I was in an abusive relationship for a long time because as it has been reiterated here quite frequently today, people in abusive situations don't leave because they feel like they don't have or will not have the support to be able to get away from their abuser. And as Ms. Bryan had said, abusers don't stop even when they've been arrested. They don't stop what they've been doing. They continue the harassment to maintain that control that they've had. My ex-husband, his control of keeping me where I was he would threaten to hurt my children or take my children away from me. And that's how he maintained his control over me, because my children are my life. So I stayed in the relationship for a long time and was physically, mentally, emotionally, and sexually abused by this man. My children, even though I didn't realize it at the time because I was so immersed in my own misery, they were also going through not physical abuse, but mental and emotional abuse, because he would always be criticizing of us. We could never do anything right. We were the worst people in the world. And in hindsight, I realize now that that was his method of once again controlling us, to put us down, to keep us there, to make us feel like we weren't worth anything. So finally, after many years, and my kids got older, they started to notice things that were happening to me. And when they were little, they didn't notice the bruises because I hid them. The broken bones, the bruises, they've all disappeared over the years. The emotional scars have not. So my children did realize what was going on. My oldest son had graduated and moved out. And my youngest son was there. And at the time, he started noticing a lot more when he turned to be about 15, 16, 17. So we talked about it, and I was open with him, and I explained to him what was going on. So we, talked about it, and he said to me, if you don't leave, I won't go to school because I will be fearful for your life, because I'll be afraid that I'll get a call one day and find out that you had been murdered. So we started looking into options to best protect myself and my family. And in the course of my journey to safety and freedom, I had a lot of people that I ran into to help me along the way. The final straw for me was when he finally did lay hands on my son, because he was abusing me one night and my son heard me scream and he came to my defense. And my ex-husband put his hands around my son's neck and tried to choke him as they were discussing the strangulation. And I was able to get him off of my son, and we ran downstairs to call 911. And again, he threatened. He said, if you call 911, and he said this to my 17-year-old son, I will break every bone in your body, and when I get out of jail, I will kill you. So needless to say, my son at this point was very traumatized and very afraid of him. So again, I spoke to lawyers and was able to get him removed from my residence by one of the judges, because I explained my situation to her. And being that my children were involved, she agreed that it was safest for him to just be removed from the house. But it was a very traumatic time for me because I wasn't sure how that would ensue and if he would find out if he would murder me. Anyway, it went off and he was without a hitch, thankfully, and he was removed from the house. I was not in the house at the time he was removed. I had notified the Hyde Park Police. They asked me to vacate the residence with my son. And actually, I'm sorry, my son was still there. They asked me to vacate the residence, and they went up and they told him they were removing him from the residence and he would have to go to the court. There was a hearing scheduled on the following Monday. This was on a Friday. So over the course of the next year, he ensued a series of stalkings that resulted in 6 arrests, 3 misdemeanors and 3 felonies. I was told by the court system after the first arrest, because again, I wasn't even going to report it, as we had discussed before, and it has been reiterated again quite frequently in, the hearings today, that no one can help you, that you're kind of out there on your own. But I did, because I said I better report it, because he did come to me and he did say, please take me back. I'm sorry. A story that I had heard over and over and over the course of 25 years. So I reported it to the police. They arrested him. He was immediately released. He didn't even, I think, spend but an hour in jail. The second time, series of stalkings, like I said, had continued. I was told by the police that unfortunately I would have to get evidence that he was stalking me, because as the victim, we have to provide the evidence that this is happening, because the criminal's word is generally taken over our word in any situation, because it seems that they have more rights sometimes than we do as the victims. So my son and I did get evidence for him. He came to my job and I had noticed my ex-husband sitting across the street in the parking lot. So my son took out his phone, he handed it to me, and he said, they want evidence, we're gonna get it for them. And he drove around and we got evidence of him, and he actually followed us down by the police station. Luckily, I work right across from the police station, the Hyde Park Police Station. So he was charged again, 2nd misdemeanor, 3rd misdemeanor. At this point, because the stalkings were increasing, I was recommended to the high risk group through the Center for Victim Safety. And as I had said before, with every arrest, he would get released because of the bail reform. My minimal bail was set for him, and he was literally out within, the first time was like an hour. I think the second time was a couple of hours. The second time he got out, he literally got out of jail, drove by my house and beeped, because I had a ring system set up once he was removed from the house. Beeped is, in other words, to say, hi, I'm still here. And my son was being honored at his school that night for being in the top 20 of his class. At this point, he was a senior now. So I had mentioned it to the police, but again, without proof, they need proof. So the Hyde Park Police, they had notified the police officer on duty at the school that night that, we were going up there to be, on the lookout for him in case he should show up, which he shouldn't have had any idea we were there, because he would have had no knowledge of it. But lo and behold, he did show up. He was there, and I notified the police, and he was very, very courteous. He notified the police department. They came up, and we were en route back home, and the police officer said he had seen him chasing after us at a very high rate of speed, trying to catch up to us. So had he caught us, who knows what he would have done. The police officer was able to pull him over. He arrested him, and again, as I said, it was after this incident that I was deemed a high risk, because again, it was not only affecting myself, but my son. I started receiving services from the Center for Victim Safety and Support. Their support for me has been invaluable, and I can't thank them enough for everything they've done for me. My anxiety was very high in the beginning. I had gone through counseling with Melissa at the Center for Victim Safety and Support, she helped me tremendously, because in the beginning, I couldn't even, he used to drive a white van, and in the beginning, I couldn't even see a white van without getting anxiety and panic attacks. couldn't even sometimes leave my house because I would be so nervous that that was him stalking me. My case was escalated. He was put on electronic monitoring. And because he complained so much about it, he was let off electronic monitoring. From the incident where he got arrested at the school to the time when he was released, it was April through September. As soon as he was released from electronic monitoring, it was quiet for about a week. And then I started getting restricted phone calls. And then the stalking started again. And they ensued Detective Slattery from the Sheriff's Department. He was assigned to me. He had called me, and it took a couple of months for him to call me because he has so many cases to go through. And he said, I apologize that it's taking me this long to get back to you. But he says, my docket is so overloaded with victims. But at the time, perchance, the night that he called me, my ex-husband had called me and was actually talking to me. And there was an order of protection in place, full stay away order. Do not talk to me, do not come near me. And he was talking to me. So Detective Slattery said, please come meet me at the office tomorrow morning. We will discuss this. And he helped me navigate through the next couple of months where there was a lot of phone calls, restricted phone calls, threatening phone calls. He would call me, say he was going to hurt me, he was going to hurt my children. And so over the course of, I would say, probably 6 months, Detective Slattery at points, at certain times, he would be by my job and actually follow my ex-husband following me. That's how crazy it got. He was actually following my ex-husband, and he told me, yeah, I'm following him, following you. So he was able to, that one night, pull him over, and he said, I'm going to bring him back to the station and charge him because I'm afraid for your safety at this point. And he even had reiterated to his higher-ups that he was concerned for my safety, that this was one of the worst domestic abuse stalking cases he had ever seen. And he felt that he should go to prison. Then after the 6th arrests, and he was able to arrest him, a year long, and I wish I could say it was not a year long, but a year-long court trial ensued because he was allowed by the court system, and this was in the county court, he was allowed to keep adjourning it and adjourning it and adjourning it because he didn't want to accept the plea deal. He didn't want to accept that he was going to maybe go to prison. And I had evidence against him. I had tape recordings, I had audio recordings, I had visual ring videos, pictures. I had all kinds of evidence because they told me I had to get evidence. And so we got evidence. And a year, and I went for every hearing to stand up and advocate for myself because these ladies had given me the strength to do that. Melissa and Hannah. And he wanted my son's order of protection removed because not only did I have an order of protection, but my 17-year-old son, who he threatened to kill, also had an order of protection. And he wanted that lifted. And that's what we were fighting over in court for about 6 months. And I went every month, and I burned up a lot of my vacation time because I would sit there in court. And even after my son had told Brittany Kessel, the assistant district attorney, in court, in front of my ex-husband and in front of the judge, that he wanted the order of protection upheld, he did not want it relinquished, he still was fighting it, my ex-husband. And so Alex had he had to go back to school because he's a student at RIT, and he notarized a letter, and we gave that to the DA because she said, are you sure that he really wants this? I said, this is what he wants. He's afraid of my ex-husband. And so in hindsight, again, that control, I think, well, he wanted to try to relinquish my son's order of protection as a way to try and stay close to me. as well as being able to see me in court because he still maintained that control over me. That was his power. That was his control. That he was going to drag it out, that he was still going to have control over the two of us. And his lawyer fought for that and kept adjourning it and adjourning it and adjourning it. So finally, I was able to read my victim impact statement in court. And his attorney had actually relinquished himself from the case because he realized the battle that he was fighting was an uphill battle. And it wasn't a battle that he wanted to fight anymore for this person, this monster that was standing next to him. So, in the courtroom. So it went in the hands of the public defender, and I stopped going after I read my victim impact statement and after the order of protection was upheld for my son. I wasn't there for his sentencing because I realized that was what he was trying to continue to see me. And I took that from him. I just took it away from him because he wasn't going to do that to me or my son anymore. So he was sentenced. He took a plea deal, which was supposed to be 6 months in jail, 6 months on EM, and 5 years of probation. He did only 4 months in jail, actually 3.5 for percentage good time served, or I forget what it's called, but yeah. And because he was on electronic monitoring for so long, once he was arrested by Detective Slattery, he was put back on EM and he was left on EM because he was deemed very dangerous. So the courts upheld that until he went to criminal court. Once he was sentenced, he argued he didn't need to be on EM anymore because he had served his time and he had been on it for so long. I've been on it for so long, I don't need to be on it anymore. And that was the plea deal that I did agree to, that he had accepted, and still he was disputing it. Still trying to get one up on me because I wasn't gonna win in his eyes. I was just merely trying to protect myself and my son. So he was released from EM. The police, the family partnership, they notified me every time he was released from jail, every time he was released from electronic monitoring. They kept me up to date on everything. So I was aware that I could be more proactive. Not that I always was, because the trauma will be always lasting. I don't trust people anymore. I'll always be looking over my shoulder. But at least I was aware he was being released. He did get 5 years probation. I have been in touch with his probation officer. She has kept me in the loop. I am part of the STRIDE program, so they, are always there for me if I need any questions answered. And I do have a full 8-year order of protection for both myself and my son, a full stay-away order of protection. But I think, as was, like I said, reiterated in the room today, the judicial system, the judges need to be a little more understanding and have some empathy from the victim's point of view instead of from the criminal's point of view. I understand that everybody has rights, the criminals and the victims. But as Mr. and Mrs. Sela had said, the scales are somewhat skewed a little bit. And I feel like the criminals have more rights than the victims do, because they're allowed to drag it out in the courtroom where we have to keep reiterating it and rehashing it and reliving it. We can't just put it behind us and try to move on with our lives. So I think there has to be a little bit more of an understanding there that they should only be allowed so much time before they say, this is either you're going to accept the plea deal or you're going to go to prison and I will put you in prison. And the judge did say that. He did say to him, if you violate the order of protection at all, I will put you in prison for as long as I could put you in prison for. So, but I mean, I haven't had any more interactions with him, thankfully, over the last year. But as I had said previously, the physical scars are gone. The broken bones are healed. I still have scars, burn scars, that are a constant reminder of the abuse that I had endured. And the emotional trauma will always be there. I'm less trusting of people. I'm more leery of people. I will always maintain my own safe space in my house. Very few people are allowed into that. I will always stay in Hyde Park because they have watched over me and protected me, and I feel safe there. I feel very safe there. But yeah, the trauma is long lasting for both myself and my children, and it always will be.
Well, thank you for that. And I just wanted to say, and Maria, I'm going to get to you in about 30 seconds. This is why this is important for us to hear this from the three of you, and of course, Silas, because you're in a different place than we are.
Right.
And it's one of these, it's also, to have to repeat this, and I thank you, for that as well. Maria?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Maria Avila, and my husband and myself, we were almost fraud victims from an oil company, heating and oil company. And on February 2023, the owner, Joe Sebron, of the company GRC Heating and Cooling, came to my house located on Pleasant Valley, New York, to inspect our old oil furnace that was not working properly. He told me that I needed to replace the furnace because it was too old and could be dangerous to keep it. He said that he will send the estimate, which I received by email the same day. I told him that we didn't have the economic resources to pay it, and we don't have the money, enough money. And he said that I can get a loan from a lending company that he works with. He sent me the link to apply, and I did for a loan as instructed. My English is not too good. I'm trying my best. This lending company is WiseTech, and I was approved for the amount of $4,500, and the money is sent directly to the GRC Heating and Cooling Company. I agreed with the lending company to pay the amount of $4,500 in 24 months with a finance charge of $478 and make payments, monthly payments of $207. The 10th day of each month starting on March 2023. By April 2023, I already did the second payment. On March, Mr. Sebron, the owner, came over to talk about the possibility of changing the old oil furnace for an electric one. He said that he can do it for the same price and he will come the following week, and nothing. I told Joe Sebron that due to the fact that he doesn't respond to fix my heater, it was becoming a health and safety concern with the toxic funds for my husband and myself, as we are all adults. At this point, I have texted and called him numerous times. On March 28th, I received a message from a guy saying that he's the new office manager of the GRC Heating and Cooling Company, saying that they had all the materials to come to my house, but then anyone didn't show up. Past almost 3 months, Mr. Sebron and the new manager, after I received this message, we were looking for a pro bono lawyer or someone who can help us, but we couldn't find anyone. We didn't know what to do or where to go. And I sent an email to the company saying that I contact the office of the Attorney General, and I have sent to Mr. Sebron and to his company multiple messages, emails, and phone calls. And clearly was a fraud. They tried to make that. Today, I have the emails copies and the messages and the phone calls dates. I did not receive the service that I was waiting for from Mr. Sebron or whoever works in that company. I wanted to be reimbursed from them, from the heating and cooling company, the total amount that the loan company sent them, but I didn't receive any answer from them. On April, I sent an email to the lending company, Wisetac, a dispute resolution, since I didn't receive any money from them, neither the job from the GRC Heating and Cooling Company. So I was waiting a favorable answer from them, but until this day, nothing. Some of my friends told me to go to the Dutchess office for the aging, and where we went. And there, I met great people, like Miss Sucerino, she was there, Linky Gas, Soy Serrano, who helped us with this intent of fraud. They help us to the program, the HIP program, to obtain our furnace, new furnace. And after that, I received from the lending company a clear and the payments that I did to that company. So I think we have a happy ending, but I think the population or the people here, we need more information. We need to be informed what's going on. We live in a town that we don't have police, for example. We don't have police station there. We are alone. We don't have anything. We don't receive any information. I think it's very different if you live here in the town, no, in the city, or outside of the city. Thanks to the Office for the Aging, now I know that we can go to reapply for the HIP. We can go to ask for a pro bono lawyers, which I don't know where can find one. But when I went to see the Attorney General to the offices, I gave them all the proofs, everything, and what happened. And they say, we will see what we can do. And done. We didn't have enough information on what to do. And was not the only problem. We had problems like that. Was not the only one. But I wanted to share this one with you.
Maria, thank you. But I want to assure you that these types of scams on unfair and illegal business practices happen everywhere. It wasn't because you were in Pleasant Valley, Poughkeepsie, you're a Pleasant Valley resident, correct?
Yeah.
It happens across the street from City Hall.
Yeah.
It happened down the street from where I used to live, where an unscrupulous, illegal asphalt guy, who we were looking for when I was a cop, was targeting seniors based on the kind of car that they drove, and would go to the house and tell them that they needed to have their driveway repaired. And one day I was home before I got to work, and I saw these guys down the street from my house. And I went down there and introduced myself to this gentleman, who was a senior, was older than me, but this was a long time ago too. He might not be now. But I said to him, I said, how much did you pay for this? And it was just a little asphalt that was just thrown down, and then they used some torches to look like they were heating it up. He gave them $17,000. Wrote a check for $17,000. And he thought he got a good deal. But this happens, it is an ever increasing issue for all of us. And thank you for telling us that story.
For hearing me.
Yeah, and it happens every day all over our communities, and these individuals need to be held accountable. But I just wanted to share the driveway story with you, and we were able to get the majority of that guy's money back.
We would like to have more information.
Yes, and that's something that we're always doing through our state committees, through district office, through Lanky, who is just so good to have on our team. So thank you. And I wanted to say to both of you, thank you for your story, your journey, people that helped you. And, as we were saying before, on a little bit of the break there, this is why that's important. And this could have just been about the victims today and crime victims and having you talk to that. It also, when you talk about the lethality instruments and the questions that are asked and the DVIRs and all the things that are out there, we're lucky we're doing it in Dutchess County, and it's only one of 3 counties in the state. I would just say this too, is it okay if I call on both of you again to have these discussions and these
Absolutely.
testimonials, so to speak?
Anytime, I would be more than willing to do it.
I just want to, and I want to echo that. I want to thank you for coming. It's not hard to relive it. I mean, it's not easy to relive it. It's very difficult. I understand that. I kind of sense the theme all the way through, and I did in the other hearings as well from the victims, and that is a little frustration as far as information. And I understand, I spoke to law enforcement and they said, well, we have to be smart. If the case is still open, we have to be very limited in what we can give out. But when it's done, but I'm looking more, a little bigger picture, and I'm wondering, I don't know if it happens now. I don't know if it's something we should look into, and that is maybe a requirement of some sort, whether it be through the courts, whether it be through law enforcement or something, that you're given information, like here's where you can go for counseling, here's where you can go. I think there is information that's given out, but I don't know if it's mandated across the state. I don't know if the courts do it. Is that something you think would be helpful?
Absolutely. I mean, myself living in Dutchess County, I am blessed because they do have services and they have a lot of support here for people. Melissa, Hardesty, and Hannah were always calling me and checking on me, updating me, giving me information. And it's a tremendous help for the victims because you know what's going on, you know how to better protect yourself. So yes, I believe it would be.
Yeah, once I know they do great work. They do, everyone I've talked to, they do amazing work and they really do care. It's getting you to that point, and I don't know, could we do a better job on the state level, or are there some areas where it's working really well and other areas where it's not? And how do we integrate it? How do we share information? How do we make sure that the victims are getting all of the information they need? I think that's one of the challenges I've been hearing. So.
Definitely.
Well, there's no doubt, I just could speak to Dutchess County because, you know, I've been here my whole life and started as a cop in 1982, is I saw, you know, the evolution of crime victim services and information that in 1982 did not exist like it does, of course, today, and even, you know, like it existed in 1990. It was getting better and better and better, and that really started with individuals who were involved in the system and speaking up and advocating for themselves and for their families. And then, you know, when we heard, you know, in Long Island, the similar things, Dean, right? You know, I didn't know about the case. There were some things you could say, some things you can't. Some departments are more tight-lipped than others. I mean, it just, but I think also, too, that what the crime victim service organizations have done have educated the law enforcement community on how important it is for there to be that communication, even if it is information that they're really not, they're not looking for, or you can't give them what they want, I think is a better way of actually saying it. But the phone call, the contact, because of where you are in feeling alone, and whether it is a business scam, whether it's a homicide, whether it's ongoing continual abuse that you can't at that particular point in time get out of, and then all the things that you have to do to actually get out of it. I mean, it's like personal contact, right? Just goes a long way. And there have been, of course, great strides made in that area. But as you know, getting back to what Kellyanne had said from Fearless, was that because you've got so many police agencies who sometimes don't have the resources, but the crimes are the same, right? It's the same. And that's why I think the systems that we advocate for on the state level is that's why there's a lot of resistance sometimes. Well, you know, you don't tell us from Albany, right? Which unfortunately happens too many times, what you want us to do if you can't fund it. But however, I do think, especially in this state and in our county, and in Orange County and other counties, Putnam County, I see Bob Tendy is still here. Bob, thank you for what you're doing at the Putt County level. Is that there are best practices that we can use, we are using, but there are other ones out there that we may not be using because people don't know about it. And that was the purpose of today, to have that discussion with the folks, with you, who lived it, who are still living it, and are working in the system, to make it better. And I want to thank everybody for coming here and hanging in here, because these are important topics that we now get to tell our colleagues about.
Right.
Dean, I'll let you wrap it.
No, and I appreciate that, because again, it feels like every time we do one, we learn a little bit more. And it's through listening, and trying to get more information, trying to paint that picture of, and have that understanding of what you go through. And that's the other theme I've kind of seen is throughout this is that's lacking in some areas. I know it's lacking in Albany. I know it's lacking there, that they don't take into consideration. When we sit in the committee, the full name of the committee is Crime Victims, Crime and Corrections. So it's, pretty in-depth. But when we see some of the bills that come forward, you just know the sponsor never had a conversation with a crime victim, never had a conversation with a crime victim advocate, or even a DA. Just never had the conversation.
And though that committee with three main topics, crime victims, that should be its own committee.
Right.
Crime, which is attached to like the codes committee for making laws. Correction should be its own committee, because they're while they're of course linked, but they're so complicated and so big and so challenging and also so personal.
Yeah.
That you should not be attached and having the same, when you have a bill calendar of all kinds of different bills, they're not all related. And so that's on us and Albany to do a better job of really sort of looking at things at a more in-depth way. But today was another step on that journey for us. So.
That's why we want to do things like this.
Again, so thank you everybody that was here today. Again, Joe, thank you for letting us use the chambers. Make sure you let the mayor know that again. And we will follow up on all of this with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.